Welcome to Ichiraku Ramen, and thank you for joining me for another journey into the world of shinobi. Before we begin, I want to give a huge thank you to everyone who listens, supports the channel, and enjoys these stories. Today's story is the fourth part of what it takes to be Hokage. In this alternate universe, Naruto Uzumaki has always dreamed of becoming Hokage, but after his devastating battle with pain, a twist of fate rips him out of his timeline and throws him deep into the brutal, blood-soaked past, the Warring States era. Trapped in a time before the hidden villages even existed, Naruto comes face to face Hashirama Senju and Uchiha Madara. Will he decide to follow the original timeline or forge a new one? This is a fan-made story inspired by the world of Naruto. All characters in the original universe belong to their respective creators. This narration is created for entertainment purposes as part of a transformative storytelling experience. The story itself was written by Solara Myles, and full credit goes to the original author. If you would like to read the original version, the link to this story is included in the video description below. If you like my content and want to keep up with future updates, hit that subscribe button and don't forget leave a like if you enjoyed the video. It not only helps me but helps with YouTube algorithm. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy. Chapter 21. Naruto stood near Ichiraku, watching Sasuke as he got into the standard shuriken jutsu stance. He held 3 shuriken in each hand, features focused on the targets in front of them. Now, Uchiha-san was at the top of his class, so pay attention everyone. Ichiraku stated proudly, always happy at a student's success. Ichiraku wasn't on guard at all, clearly not concerned with having to dodge shuriken when Sasuke was throwing them. Sasuke's arms blurred as they whipped the shuriken through the air. The shuriken hit the post and carried on going straight through, landing in the trees behind the academy. The students oh'd and awed as normal, and Naruto rolled his eyes, muttering, "Show off," under his breath. "So who would like to give it a go? Sure-chan?" Ichiraku smiled at the Uchiha who huffed and pouted at being called upon. Naruto grinned at that. Looked like she took after Itachi and not wanting too much attention. So then why the dramatic show and tell performance? Yet, she came over to where Sasuke was standing. He handed her 6 shuriken, looking far too large in her tiny hands. She flicked her hands and Naruto sensed the chakra she placed within the shuriken, enabling them to hit the target with enough force to blow away chunks of the wooden post. Uchiha didn't know when enough was perfectly fine. However, that level of chakra mastery showed the benefits of having 2 doting older brothers. Could sure be suited for medical ninjutsu or becoming a powerhouse kunoichi? Naruto watched as a few eager volunteers jumped around, desperate to be chosen so they too could show off their prowess. Ichiraku grew guarded and watchful as each student stepped up to throw their 6 shuriken. Only a handful really hit the post, but there were the odd few that were just as terrible as Naruto had been. Tatsumaki, however, did not volunteer, prompting Ichiraku to call on him. The boy had to throw. It was a progress check. Was this his usual demeanor? Or was this a result of the trials? Even if it was, Uzumaki usually bounced back fairly quickly, so what was wrong? Tatsumaki stepped up to receive his 6 shuriken. He stood carefully, double-checking his stance before raising his hands to throw the shuriken. Just by the angle alone, Naruto knew they wouldn't even come close to hitting the post. Not to mention the fact that he was holding the shuriken incorrectly, which would result in something closer to a wild barrage of projectiles that were better suited to widespread dispersal rather than focused target hitting. He disappeared from Ichiraku's side and snatched Tatsumaki's shuriken from the air just as the boy let go. "What the?" the pink-haired boy exclaimed with a wide gaze as he stepped backwards in surprise. "What's up with you?" Naruto asked pointedly, not caring for beating around the bush. "You've been in a mood. Besides, your shuriken wouldn't have hit. They'd have hit Ichiraku-sensei more than the post. I did that once or twice, so he should be used to it, but still." Naruto flicked a shuriken into the air, catching it and throwing it again as he spoke. "I mean, you're supposed to be at least standing with your feet slightly wider, your center of gravity closer to the ground. Or you could copy Sasuke team and throw it like you just don't care, but that takes a level of practice he'd never admit to." He continued to flick the shuriken, watching Tatsumaki as he grew more agitated, chakra growing angry. Yeah? What do you know? You're the dobe of the academy. The fifth failure of a son. So what the hell do you know? Tatsumaki yelled, pushing Naruto backwards. Naruto didn't respond right away. He wanted to find out what was bugging the kid, really bugging the kid. He tossed the shuriken into the barrel, placing his hands on his hips. So what if I'm the academy baka? I still managed to beat the trials when all the Uzumaki combined couldn't. Ichiraku gasped, knowing that was a low blow, especially for Naruto. He wanted to step in, but a glare from Naruto made him step back. Yeah, I didn't technically finish from the academy. I got out on an apprenticeship and I didn't have a team for 3 years. I sat around waiting for solo genin missions while having nothing better to do than study and train. What's your excuse? Naruto continued. I'm an Uzumaki by nature, so I don't pretend otherwise when I'm training. You, on the other hand, you're not even trying the academy style. Tatsumaki grit his teeth, glaring at Naruto. At least I'm not known for being a failure. At least I have an older brother who can stand being around me. At least I know I'll graduate with a team. Naruto narrowed his gaze. This was not the Uzumaki way. He snatched the kid's shirt, lifting the boy to eye level. Something was up with the kid. He used his free hand to begin the hand signs for a seal. He tapped Tatsumaki's forehead while the boy squirmed to get free. Naruto's chakra transferred to Tatsumaki's skin, covering Tatsumaki's body until he was shining faintly. Kai! A myriad of active seals began to show on the boy's skin, shining even through his clothes. Naruto's eyes widened. Some were harmless, some were protection seals, and some were for training, but there were 2 that stood out to Naruto. Who put these on you? Naruto yelled, his own anger rising. A subtle tracking seal hidden in a chakra-draining seal. Those were bright red flags of something being very wrong. He shook Tatsumaki when the boy didn't immediately answer, too shocked at Naruto's sudden aggressiveness. What the heck are you talking about? Tatsumaki yelled back, the fear in his tone reacting to Naruto's anger, while he continued to struggle to get free. Naruto ignored him. He turned his glare to Ichiraku, who flinched, having not known Naruto to get so angry, nor to be so proficient at seals. I'm taking Tatsumaki to see his grandfather. You can't. Tatsumaki huffed, getting tired from the struggling. He's on a mission. What about Erasure? Naruto leveled his tone, taking the anger out but leaving in the seriousness. Tatsumaki just glared at him. Sasuke, we're going to find Erasure. Wait, Naruto-kun, at least tell me what's wrong? Ichiraku demanded. He couldn't just have Naruto react like that, and then tell him nothing. Someone's draining his chakra through a seal. There isn't even a limiter placed on the drain. Essentially, if it's left there, it'll kill him. Naruto replied gruffly, while Sasuke jumped onto the school roof. Ichiraku sighed heavily. You better bring him back in one piece, Naruto. It was more of a plead than a warning. Naruto nodded and followed Sasuke, tossing Tatsumaki onto his back. Hold on, Gaki, and hold on tight, we're going to go fast. Minato watched them go with a grim look on his features. The Hokage office was close enough to the academy that he noticed Naruto's presence. A one-handed seal jutsu was a feat he was sure Kushina would struggle with. So where did Naruto learn it? And a chakra absorption seal? What was that about? Sure sway. Minato stated, directing his attention towards the shinobi that was approaching him with a mission report. Follow them, but do not make your presence known. I want to know the outcome of the situation. If Tatsumaki had a chakra drain seal, then who else had one? More importantly, who had put it there and why? Sasuke decided to try Sakura first. She was more aware of what Erasure was up to these days. Sakura eeped in surprise when Naruto dashed towards her in the hospital hallway. Naruto-kun, what's wrong? Is something wrong with Tatsu-kun? The pink-haired boy was pale, eyes glazed over, so she immediately shifted her attention to the preteen. Yes, but I need to see Erasure first. Do you know where he is? Naruto asked just as Sasuke dropped in from the window. Arashi-kun? Sakura hummed. Actually, he's here. He stopped by this morning complaining of unnatural fatigue. They're busy testing him now. Sasuke glanced at Naruto, who'd tensed. Mind taking us to them? Sasuke asked, turning towards Sakura, who nodded in confusion. Sure. This way. Sakura led them down to the testing rooms, being careful not to disturb any of the other medic nin and patients. He said he had periodic headaches, dizzy spells, and more recently momentary lapses in consciousness. Sakura provided while Tatsumaki's eyes grew wide. Any of that sound familiar, Tatsu? Naruto prompted to the pre-genin still on his back. The boy only nodded, suddenly looking very worried. Naruto looked back at Sakura with a frown. Anyone else with those symptoms? No. Arashi-kun was the first, and now Tatsu-kun. What did you notice that you're looking for, Erasure? Sakura asked, pausing by a door and opening it. Sorry to bother, but we've received more news regarding Arashi-kun's condition. Naruto walked further in the room, not missing the way Arashi's face grew more guarded and the way his chakra grew a little more turbulent. Sakura took Tatsumaki from Naruto's back and placed him on the bed next to Erasure, who immediately tried to check the boy over. Tatsumaki waved him off, looking more grumpy and exhausted than anything else. So, Naruto-kun, what did you notice? Sakura asked again as the other medic nin appeared to be waiting for Sakura to say something. It's a seal. Naruto replied, walking closer to Erasure. A dangerous one. He repeated the same hand signs as earlier before tapping Arashi's chest, the red-haired Uzumaki looking like he wanted to back away but finding it more difficult when seated on a bed. The same seals that had worried Naruto before appeared on Erasure. Naruto pointed to the seal, a small one placed on the back of Arashi's hand, a point of constant and innocent contact so he'd never suspect a thing. This seal right here. There's two seals hidden to look like one. A tracking seal, and a chakra-draining seal. Problem is, well, other than the seals themselves, is that there isn't a limiter placed on the seals. So if he doesn't replenish his chakra faster than the seals drain it, well then he'd die. Particularly dangerous if he's on a mission. Did Haruto have the same seal? Possibly not. If Haruto was too experienced, he noticed the seal being placed. The other two were too young, too innocent to believe in such deception. It was a deception that would only come from the inside. Someone had betrayed the leaf. So, you can do a one-handed seal jutsu? Erasure stated tonelessly. A seal jutsu that I don't think I've seen before. Naruto hummed. He'd gotten to the point where he'd forgotten which jutsu he wasn't supposed to know. Seals aren't always visible when they're active, and some seals can contradict. I didn't want to cause unnecessary explosions because I didn't know what seals had already been placed on stuff. Naruto shrugged. He wasn't exactly lying. Never mind that for now. How do we remove the seal? Sasuke interrupted, looking towards Naruto for the answer. Naruto decided to step back at this point. He'd revealed too much already. Don't look at me. I know how to see seals. Not much else. I would call in Haruto-san. Naruto actually wanted to trace the tracker, maybe find a sample of the caster's chakra, see where the tracker was linked to, but if he showed too much he'd have to explain something he didn't have plausible answers for. Either way, someone was trying to drain their chakra and keep track of them. Why? Was it just them? Were there more people who need to be checked? The most important aspects to consider were who had put the seal on the two Uzumaki in the first place and why. Naruto shuffled his way out of his room, not really awake yet but having smelled breakfast being made. The thought of cooked breakfast was enough to get him out of bed earlier than planned. Morning, Naruto-kun. Kushina smiled at the sleepy blonde from the fridge. She poured him a glass of milk and placed it in front of him as he sat at the table. He mumbled a reply and gave a sleepy smile. Kushina laughed and ruffled his hair. I'm making eggs and toast. Nothing fancy, she stated as she went back to the stove to add more eggs to the pan. You'll be glad to know that Arashi-kun and Tatsu-kun are going to be just fine. The seals were easy enough to remove. Unfortunately, we weren't able to trace them back to the caster. She placed a plate of eggs and toast in front of him, and Naruto stared at the contents before sighing. I'm glad they're okay. He didn't say more than that. He got the feeling that his mom was fishing. For what, he wasn't sure. Maybe how he knew to look for seals. Maybe to know if he could have removed the seals himself. Who knew? Maybe she wasn't fishing at all. Menma walked in, eyes narrowing on Naruto as he accepted a plate from his mother. I thought you had a meeting this morning, he stated quietly, addressing Kushina. He sat down opposite Naruto, his gaze lingering on the blonde longer than necessary. I do. But I asked them if I could make breakfast for my family. It's been a while. Kushina replied, focusing on the eggs still in the pan. Your father and I have already eaten. Kushina put another egg on Naruto's plate, and another on Menma's plate. She kissed Menma's forehead and ruffled Naruto's hair again. I'll see you boys later. She disappeared with a shunshin, leaving an uncomfortable silence at the table. So, Naruto began, taking a bite of toast which he tucked in a cheek so he could ask. How's things going? Menma gave him a blank stare, not replying at all before cutting an egg and eating a piece. Naruto shrugged and focused on his toast. You did a one-handed seal jutsu, Menma stated. He didn't say it like it was a question, so Naruto wasn't sure what the other wanted. I don't know many Uzumaki that can do that, let alone little academy dobes. Naruto shrugged. I've picked up a few things. He gulped down the glass of milk and shoved the eggs into his mouth, making sure to almost have too much so that Menma couldn't ask him to elaborate. He didn't wait to finish what was in his mouth before putting his plate in the sink and dashing out the door with a wave at Menma. It was regrettable, as he'd actually like to take a moment to talk to Menma more, get to know more about this new brother he now found himself with. Menma watched him go with a narrowed gaze. There was something up with Naruto, and he knew that this development was somewhat sudden. After all, he'd always paid attention to what Naruto was doing. It was one of his longest-running missions. Besides, nothing could change the fact that Naruto was still his little brother. A little brother that was growing odder by the day. A report was in order. Naruto rushed over to the bridge where Sasuke was waiting for him. Sakura and Kakashi were on their way. He'd felt their chakra as he dashed over, making their way steadily towards the bridge. Sasuke waved at him with a half-smile. Yo! Talk of the village again, aren't we? He smirked, having picked up on the fact that Naruto was hiding a lot of his skill from their sensei and Sakura. Well, I dunno, I couldn't just leave the kid. I've been around long enough to know that something was wrong with him. Naruto shrugged, facing the water below the bridge. He didn't see the look of confusion Sasuke gave him when he mentioned being around long enough. We've got a mission, apparently a proper one. Sasuke chose to ignore it. Naruto was odd, but the blonde was growing on him. Truthfully, more than Erasure ever really had. He hadn't noticed it before, but Erasure never really let anyone in. The Uzumaki had a large chip on his shoulder over the death of his parents, and while Sasuke didn't blame him, meeting Naruto just made him realize how little he really knew Erasure. Finally. Although I'm more worried about what's happening inside the village than out of it. Honestly, I'm disappointed that they couldn't backtrace the tracking seal. Naruto huffed with a frown. So they could remove it then? Sasuke frowned as well. Anyone capable of putting a seal on them must have been close to them, at least physically. How many Uzumaki would do that? It's not an Uzumaki. It can't be. Not with how close the clan is. Naruto waved the suggestion away, but Sasuke shook his head. How close they used to be. From what I hear, the sensing ability has seen a decline in recent generations, so they're not as close-knit as they used to be. A decline? What on earth would cause that? Natural genetics? Hang on, his own sensing ability was somewhat compromised due to the chakra in the walls. Hence it had taken him so long to start talking. Could it be that the sensing wasn't declining, but rather it was facing interference? He'd have to look into that. However, would fixing the problem really help matters? If they were steadily growing used to not being able to sense each other all the time, would suddenly changing that do more harm than good? I'll look into it. For now, Kakashi and Sakura are about to arrive. Naruto muttered, not thinking about how odd it was to take responsibility for the Uzumaki sensing ability, or rather lack thereof, and turning to face the direction the two were coming from. They appeared to have met up a little before arriving. Kakashi waved and Sakura smiled brightly as they approached. "We've got an interesting one," Kakashi announced, holding up an A-rank scroll. Naruto grinned and held out his hand. "Can I see, or are you going to keep us all in suspense?" Kakashi handed the scroll over and Sasuke moved closer to Naruto so he could see the mission parameters as well. "This is an A rank?" Sasuke rose a brow questioningly. "It's a scouting mission?" Naruto didn't say anything, choosing to let the others do the talking. The location couldn't be a coincidence, could it? "Oh, come on, Sasuke-kun, look at where we're going. That's probably why it's an A rank. Besides, I'm not complaining about the pay increase. I wonder why us though? Wouldn't Arashi-kun have been more suited for the mission? It says here that a sealing expert is required." Sakura pointed to the mission requirements and Sasuke shrugged. "I don't care where it is, it's still a scouting mission." "Well, Naruto-kun, I guess you're considered the sealing expert of the team. What do you think?" Kakashi asked, looking at the blonde who'd been suspiciously quiet. "What are we scouting in the middle of Takagakura no Sato for? Isn't that Waterfall Village? What do we have lost there?" Naruto decided to press for information since his history of this world was so lacking. The village hidden in the waterfalls was where Kakazu was originally from. A village that originally did not hold much power or prominence. Was that still the case? "Seriously, Naruto, did you pay attention in school at all?" Sasuke scowled. "'Cause everyone knows it's home to one of the 8 sealing wonders of the elemental nations." 8? There were 9. Did they not know about Konoha being a whole sealing wonder in of itself? However, the fact that they knew there were 8, that was worrying. He thought he'd hid some of the sealing spots better. But he supposed that the lack of something was an indication of anything, and that was a red flag in of itself. "Sealing wonders?" he asked with a blank look, just to see what else they knew. "There are 8 spots around the elemental nations that are clearly affected by seals, in some way or form. No one knows why, who, or even how. All that has been speculated is that an Uzumaki did it, perhaps one of the wandering faction ones. So our mission is to see what we can learn from the one in Takagakura," Sakura explained. "Ah, so they didn't know much. I heard that there are legendary beasts sealed away. Beasts of vast amounts of chakra. There have been plenty of expeditions trying to unlock the seals in order to gain control of these beasts. Clearly no one has succeeded yet. Apparently, the Shodai had control of one of those beasts," Sasuke said with a smirk. The stories of the beasts were like bedtime stories to the Uchiha. The feats of the Shodai and his beast were some of Sasuke's favorite. They say the Shodai's beast was fox-like in appearance, and that the moment the Shodai died, the beast went with him. They romanticized it by saying the beast couldn't live without him, but I hardly think that's how it really went down. So they'd managed to gather that much. Well, he'd look closely on this mission just to see if anything had been tampered with or removed. He'd placed plenty of seals, just to be sure. It was hard to imagine anyone stumbling into the seals, especially since the locks all keyed into his chakra signature. So unless someone happened to have the same chakra as him, which was highly unlikely, it would be next to impossible to open. Naruto dropped the scroll as his fingers suddenly went lax. 1,000 scenarios played themselves through his mind as he tried to puzzle together the possibility that someone just might be able to unlock those seals using Erasure and Tatsumaki's chakra. Someone trying, though, would mean they'd have to know that it was him, the Shodai, that had created those seals, and they'd also have to know that Haruto was his son. The possibility of a traitor grew more and more likely with each passing discovery. Had someone found out about the Bija? How? There were no records of them? Only ever-whispered conversations amongst the 5 founders of Konoha. Unless the records of Naruto's use of Kurama was enough. That was a large leap to make on one's own, however. What was going on in this village? Naruto! Sasuke smacked him upside the head. What the hell, man? Where are you spacing out to? Sorry. Naruto grinned, rubbing the back of his head. I guess I'm just hungry. He lied, knowing full well that he was very far from being hungry. So what are we looking for exactly? Mission objective says reports have been coming in of some disturbance in the area, so we're going to check it out. Kakashi bent down to pick up the scroll and shook it off before rolling it shut and putting it back in his pocket. So head home and pack a bag for about 5 days. We'll meet back here in an hour. Naruto waved and began walking back to his house. He was a little surprised when Sasuke started walking with him. So you're hungry, huh? Naruto shrugged. How much could he trust Sasuke, and how much could he tell him? You don't ask too many questions, and for that I'm grateful. Naruto began. But there are things that I know, things that I can't explain right now. For now, let's just say that if I had some history questions, could you answer them? Maybe. I kept telling you not to sleep through the history lessons. Sasuke grinned. Can I just ask what changed? I mean, from the academy to now? Naruto titled his head in consideration. I don't know. Experience, maybe. He grinned at the double meaning of his answer. He wondered if he should try to explain why he was so weird in the academy. The village is basically one giant seal, you know. The whole place is sort of alive. Ever since I was little I could hear the chakra in the walls, hear it or feel it, I'm not sure. But it's the reason I was so weird back then. I didn't realize it was something other people couldn't do. I'm a pretty decent censor. A censor? Well, that makes sense. You always seem to know things about people, like in a creepy way. Being a censor explains some of that. Sasuke hummed. I mean, that makes sense. For most of the stuff. Not all of it though, but I don't think anyone has an answer for the really weird stuff. I heard my brother and Nena talking about it once. They're completely baffled. Naruto chose not to reply, opening the door to his house and asking Sasuke if he wanted to come in. Sasuke accepted and followed Naruto to his room, where the blonde began packing a bag. Naruto still missed the bright orange he'd grown used to, but the new sturdier and sleeker black wasn't so bad. He clipped the bag into place and grabbed some extra sealing ink for his pouch. Menma was a weird person, now that he thought about it. The man didn't interact much with him, but he seemed to always be around. Which was weird for someone who always supposedly had something better to do, as well as for someone who didn't like him much. So, what is the history of the founding of Konoha? Naruto asked, taking the moment to get some history lessons in while he searched for his spare kunai holster. The founding of Konoha? Well, the Uzumaki, the Senju and the Uchiha came together to create the first ever shinobi village. Legend says the village pretty much sprung up overnight. Not sure how though. Buildings take time. Sasuke replied, looking at a poster on Naruto's wall depicting some movie heroine that Naruto didn't know. It did. Hashirama and the Shodai used a combination of wood release and seals to build the entire village. There are some areas that have been added on, but all of the original buildings were created using seals. Told you, I can hear them. Naruto hummed, looking through his weapons and deciding which ones might come in handy. Thinking about it, what had happened to his sword as the Shodai? He'd worked long and hard on that sword and it was awesome. What happened after the village was first built? Naruto prompted. He was more interested in where Madara and Hashirama went with things. The village grew steadily, with a lot of clans having been invited to the village. No one really declined the invites except for a few clans, like some who originally resided in Mizu. Sasuke shrugged, which would explain Haku's still not being in Konoha. What about the war in Mizu? That question might be beyond Sasuke for now. The Shodai ruled for some time, mainly focusing on getting the village settled. The other clans weren't happy about the village's formation, but with Konoha's focus on being self-sustaining, there was little they could do to goad the village into conflict. Sasuke paused to toss Naruto a spare shirt from the closet. He got the idea that Naruto wanted a little more information and continued. The Shodai was killed in an ambush just outside the village borders. Senju Hashirama was said to have been the intended target, however Uzumaki Naruto took a jutsu meant for the wood-style user and didn't survive it, enabling Hashirama to get to safety. Naruto zipped his pack closed and swung it onto his back. He contemplated the last piece of information, realizing now that Hashirama has been rather insistent on that spar just before hitting him with the time jutsu. Would have been hard to convince the others that there was an ambush if he came back clean and unscathed. And the village believed it was an ambush? Naruto asked. Madara wouldn't have. Unless Hashirama told him the truth. Sasuke narrowed his gaze. It was an odd question to ask. Not all of the original founders did. I believe the incident created conflict between Uchiha Madara and Senju Hashirama. Well, Senju Hashirama was made the Nidaime Hokage, with some saying that Uchiha Madara was a close candidate. There's a rumor that the whole thing was decided over a cooking contest. So that may have been the real cause of the conflict. Sasuke was growing more suspicious, and wondered if perhaps he was too trusting of the change in Naruto, chalking it off to time spent apart. That excuse seemed to be explaining less and less. So Madara had grown suspicious. Naruto walked to the door, leaving Sasuke to follow so they could go to the Uchiha compound. Did anything ever come of the conflict? Naruto asked, fearing that Madara had left the village. Well, eventually Madara left. No one really knows why, only that Hashirama went after him and they ended up fighting near the Valley of the End. Sasuke answered, taking the lead once they'd left Naruto's house to lead the way to his. Naruto internally sighed. Seemed history didn't really like changing. Could there be more to it than that? Okay, I think I've got it. Nothing really new after that, to me anyway. Nothing else really mattered. It seemed the natural order of things followed, the only major difference being the lack of war and his father's continued existence. Where had Madara gone after he'd left? Did it matter? They arrived at Sasuke's house with very little being said as Naruto was too lost in thought to reply to Sasuke's grumbles about the scouting mission. It seemed the Uchiha preferred more action-intensive missions. Naruto felt the same as Sasuke, but there was something else going on in the village, and if the tailed beasts were becoming involved again, then the mission was a necessary one. When they arrived at Sasuke's house, the Uchiha frowned at the set of shoes placed neatly next to those of his family's. Menma's style was hard to miss, not so much in the shoe, but rather the precise way he placed them. He didn't say anything to Naruto, hoping to get to his room and back out without any fuss. Yet that hope was dashed as he moved to the passage and was faced with the view of Itachi's room door remaining open while his older brother and Menma quietly discussed something. Their body language suggested they were arguing. That was rare. They hardly ever argued, in public anyways. Itachi's eyes caught his and the older Uchiha frowned. His gaze moved to Naruto and his frown deepened before he stood and moved to close his room door. Naruto hadn't missed the scene either, and was frowning as well. He hadn't missed the treated cuts and small rips that Itachi was sporting. Must have just come back from a mission. Sasuke continued to his room while mentally cataloging what he'd need to pack. His brother was weird and he'd long ago stopped trying to understand him. Naruto, however, lingered, stretching out his sensing to try and get a better idea of Itachi and Menma's moods. However, Itachi's room was blocked by seals. That was odd. Especially in the Uchiha district. Do they argue a lot? Naruto asked, looking to Sasuke, who shook his head and answered. Usually they're on the same page. As weird as anyone understanding Itachi may sound. Menma is just as much of a mystery to most. Sasuke was faster in figuring out what he needed and moved to the door before Naruto could explore much of the Uchiha's room. He was struck with the realization that perhaps their relationship had shifted to a deeper one a little too quickly. He'd barely been back in the present, and yet here he was, standing in Sasuke's room, a privilege he hadn't been afforded in his previous lifetime. Not until he'd begun cleaning away the dust building up in Sasuke's absence. His mind shifted to the more interesting topic of Menma and Itachi's argument. It was strange. Naruto hadn't been here long enough to make any guesses, but he had seen how close the two were. They always seemed to be having a silent conversation, one not meant for other ears or eyes. That closeness had been absent in the argument they'd been having, so naturally Naruto wondered what they were arguing about. We should get going before we're late. Kakashi-sensei is pretty punctual. Sasuke reminded as he walked down the passage. He spared a glance towards his brother's room but otherwise ignored it. They didn't have time to investigate what could ultimately turn out to be nothing. Naruto followed with a nod, deciding to dismiss the argument. The bigger problem was the mission as well as Tatsumaki and Erasure. If they were the only two who had those seals, then it was safe to say that someone knew about the seals being keyed into his chakra, and someone knew the two were related to him. Now honestly, that person didn't need to know about his true origins. After all, the seal hadn't been placed on himself, which would have produced greater results. Still, the person, whoever they were, knew far too much. Only someone with connections to the past or a sealing master would be able to figure it out. Which was it? Chapter 22. The first night of their trip saw Kakashi and Naruto taking first watch. Sasuke and Sakura knew better than to linger, since the longer they stayed awake once the watch had begun, the less sleep they were getting. The trip hadn't been eventful, and they hardly expected the night to be any more so. Naruto was somewhat saddened by how quiet the trip had been, but he had been lost in thought, and without his constant chatter, the team seemed fine with their silent journey. Naruto finished a short, uneventful patrol before seating himself next to Kakashi, who was reading a book. The blonde was experienced enough to know that Kakashi wasn't really reading, just using the book as a prop, so to speak. He'd probably read the book 1,000 times, and probably used it to avoid unnecessary conversations. Hatake Kakashi was a genius, and most times that meant he didn't really know how to handle people. "I don't blame you," Naruto said suddenly, surprising the Jonin. "For not carrying on my apprenticeship, I mean. How could I?" Naruto smiled at the memories in his head. "You were the only one that believed in me becoming a shinobi from the start, so really, I am where I am today because of you." Kakashi sighed and put the book down. "I saw something in you that no one else seemed to. Don't ask me why. Maybe it was how similar you looked to the Shodai." Kakashi smiled and ruffled Naruto's hair at the small joke. "I'm sorry for how long I left you on your own. I always assumed Minato-sensei would have gotten someone more village-bound to continue your training. I guess I never believed he'd ignore you the way he did. Before I knew it, 2 years or so had passed. I don't think he ignored me. Konoha is a large village and requires an immense amount of attention. Perhaps, like you, time got away from him. Time is funny that way." Naruto smiled wistfully. "If left unattended, a man can life his whole live without realizing it." He sounded far too old with that statement, and Kakashi gave him an odd look, yet he didn't comment. "So how did you get so good?" Kakashi asked, his tone daring Naruto to lie. "I know what your abilities were when I left you, and I know how much you hated books, but left to logic, the library was really the only place you could have turned to without a teacher. Hi, and I did. In desperation, to prove my worth, I went to the library. I also watched other shinobi train." Naruto smiled. "If anything, I was good at hiding. You'd be surprised how much one picks up simply with watching. I was getting really good too." Naruto's smile widened at the memories in his head. He may have been on his own, but he really had been onto something before the merge of his past self with his present self. Naruto lifted his palm and allowed a small Rasengan to form. "See?" He directed a bright grin towards Kakashi. The Jonin smiled and ruffled Naruto's hair again. "I'd expect nothing less from my star pupil." Naruto needed this, and maybe so did Kakashi. His chest bubbled with the happiness and affection from Kakashi. They'd barely had time to discuss the failed apprenticeship. The man was more like an older brother to him than a team captain, perhaps replacing the bond his past self had grown with Ichiraku-sensei. Glancing back towards his sleeping teammates, Naruto couldn't help but wonder if he could trust his team with his secret. Takigakure no Sato wasn't far from Konoha, and incidentally was also the closest sealing wonder other than Konoha itself. The trip there didn't take too long, and Naruto actually enjoyed it. He'd left his worries behind, deciding to only concern himself if he needed to, and he'd only know if he needed to when they got there. "So how's medical training going, Sakura-chan?" Naruto asked. They'd decided to walk at a civilian's pace for the last stretch. Getting into Takigakure wasn't a problem. As one of the smaller nations, they knew that the quickest path from one larger nation to the other was directly through the smaller nations, and therefore didn't really make a fuss about the trespassing, so to speak, so long as those passing through kept away from certain areas. Actually, it's going really well. I've started picking up shifts at the hospital. Tsunadeheim has expressed interest in apprenticing me, Sakura replied with a blushing grin. The team, while close, didn't really ask too many personal questions, so she was surprised by the topic. Congratulations, Naruto stated with a wide grin. When they'd spoken about her medical ninjutsu before, she hadn't mentioned how far along she'd been, just that she was interested. Sasuke and Kakashi also offered their congratulations, Kakashi even asking her what level she was aiming for. I myself expressed some interest in the field, but there were those that felt my talents would be wasted in medical ninjutsu, Kakashi continued, eyes growing distant. Standing this close to the man, Naruto could see the small touches of Tobirama in the man's DNA. The cool, level feel of his chakra, the shape and color of his hair, the slope of his jawline, his lean muscular frame. His eyes must have come from the Hatake line. Something wrong, Naruto? Kakashi asked with an eye smile, and Naruto gave a small smile in response. Just noticing how similar you look to Senju Tobirama. He decided to be honest, see how Kakashi reacted. That would tell him if he knew the truth or not. Sasuke squinted at his sensei, sizing up the man with the picture from their history books. If Naruto hadn't paid much attention in class, how did he know what Senju Tobirama looked like? Yet he had a point. Kakashi for the most part hummed thoughtfully before smiling again. It's the hair, isn't it? He joked. Naruto shook his head before performing a basic henge. It's a lot more than that. His voice was also different, and Naruto inwardly cringed at not realizing that maybe he shouldn't have changed it, since he couldn't realistically explain how he knew what it sounded like. Oh well. He'd have to just go with it. You're even the same height. Naruto stood next to Kakashi, showing that they really were almost exactly the same height. Your hair is more than a little bit the same. Here Naruto pulled Sasuke's headband off before the Uchiha knew what hit him, and tied it to his own head. See? Sakura giggled and Sasuke scowled before snatching his headband back. Naruto let the henge drop, starting to walk again. It seemed that the man didn't know he was related to the Senju. Given his age compared to Tsunade's, it was safe to assume that Kakashi was Tobirama's great-grandchild. Well, if you insist, I did have an idea of the similarities. I was teased at school because of how similar I looked to the Sandaime. I eventually decided it was the hair. However, I didn't know it was that similar, Kakashi replied. It's almost uncanny, actually. Yet not as uncanny as your resemblance to the Shodai. Yeah, now that you mention it, Sakura stated, scrunching her nose. He really does look like the Shodai. Naruto's grin widened. If only they knew. I am related to him. In some way. My mom is an Uzumaki and so was he. If we're really comparing, then Sasuke looks like Uchiha Izuna. Sasuke gave him a snort, and Naruto henged again. See. This time he didn't change his voice. Izuna was perhaps a little more tan, and Sasuke's eyes were more angular. Izuna was slightly taller, yet Sasuke was still growing, so it was possible that the Uchiha would catch up. Yet the similarities were enough that they could have been brothers. And how would you know what Uchiha Izuna looks like? Sasuke challenged. You barely opened a book in the academy. The mood was nice. The sun wasn't too warm, and the leaves provided both a small bit of shade and a great view with all the autumn colors. Hey, I at least browsed them. And the pictures were the most interesting thing, better than Ichiraku-sensei's lessons. Naruto lied with a small smirk, letting the henge drop. They'd begun walking again, nearing their mission objective. As it was, they'd heard the sounds of the waterfall for a while now. They just had to round a bend in the road. The light-hearted mood and as well Sasuke's reply vanished the moment they did. Naruto swung his arms wide, crashing into Sasuke and Sakura's chests, immediately halting their movement. Nobody move. Naruto wheezed, having taken a step too far himself. This is an active seal arrangement, and not the good kind. I need you two to step back. Sasuke pulled Sakura with him as he did as asked, Kakashi unfortunately having done the same as Naruto, and having taken a step too far. Whatever this ceiling wonder is, someone's been tampering with it. They seem to have activated a sort of fail-safe. I can't move. I've leaned the top half of my body away from the seal, but I can't stay like this forever. As soon as I straighten my posture, I won't even be able to talk to you. Whoever had meddled wasn't very good at it if they hadn't deactivated the seals. Did they get what they wanted? Or were they somewhere further and just as trapped as Naruto and Kakashi? Naruto looked towards Kakashi. He didn't even know he was trapped. He was frozen in the motion of walking, a smile still on his face at the conversation topic. You both need to get back to the village as fast as you can. Just in case whoever did this is still around. We're stuck, who knows who else is. The locals won't know what to do with this. Lastly, we're still vulnerable. Someone could easily pick us off with a kunai, so I need you to run. Naruto tried to keep the situation calm yet relay the urgency of the matter. The seal affected anything with a large chakra signature, such as shinobi, hence the waterfall was still running. Sasuke grimaced and half-turned towards Konoha. They'd never been put in a position where their teammates' lives were in danger. This was new, yet Naruto took charge like he was a born leader. Shouldn't I stay here? Sakura asked, her voice high and her words strained. Her posture suggested that she wanted to curl inwards, her hand moving towards her chin. No, I need you to both run. If something happens to Sasuke, then we won't know nor have the backup to get to Konoha in time. Naruto just needed them both gone so he could take a look around without unwanted eyes. Come on, Sakura. We need to go. Sasuke stated tonelessly, eyes already in the direction of Konoha. The longer we take, the longer they're at risk. Naruto was actually proud of Sakura's suggestion as it had been the most logical one. Sakura nodded and the two dashed off, moving at a pace that meant they'd be meters away in a minute or two. Naruto waited 5 full minutes, taking careful note of his position, before blurring through the hand signs needed to free himself. Creating a bubble of chakra around himself, he was careful not to interact too closely with the air around Kakashi. He wanted to have a look around without the others, and while the trap was a genuine one, he was grateful for the use it currently had to him. If Sasuke and Sakura continued at their pace, they'd be back in Konoha in 2 days. But they wouldn't be able to maintain that pace forever, so 3 to 4 days was a better estimate. In front of him stood the waterfall and cave systems that served as the entrance to the small village that had once settled in the area. They no longer resided here as Naruto had effectively cut off the pathways that led to the inner island. Those cave systems were what he'd chosen to protect the 3 tails. Embedding time and space-based seals into the walls meant that the caves would become an endless maze few would ever leave should they activate the security seals. The village had also once been the birthplace of Kakazu, and Naruto hadn't wanted a repeat assassination attempt on Hashirama or any of the others for that matter. The village hidden in the waterfalls had settled close by but had not managed to utilize the cave systems. Naruto ran towards them now, taking in the signs of recent invasion. Whoever had been here, they'd hit hard, and likely fast to avoid the seals. Perhaps they were still trapped in the caves? He dashed towards the ledge that moved behind the waterfall, keeping his balance easily enough even though half his concentration was on maintaining the chakra bubble. Inside the caves were smaller pools of water. One had to know which pool to jump into in order to get to the 3 tails. No one other than he knew exactly which one. Perhaps someone else knew a method that would tell them? He placed a hand into each pool, trying to sense out a presence locked in the time seal. Yet there was none. He could even tell that some of his seals and traps had been activated in almost every pool. So the person had simply gone into each pool until they'd found the right one. The level of skill that must have taken. Naruto didn't even want to think about who might have been meddling. Was it the trader in the village or someone from a new village entirely? Gritting his teeth, he sprang into the pool, immediately feeling chilled to the bone. He may have a chakra bubble, but it didn't keep out the natural elements. He swam as quickly as he dared lest there be more traps left by the enemy, and careful to avoid his own traps that the enemy surprisingly hadn't set off. He emerged on the other end slowly, taking note of the damage the open area had sustained. A battle of sorts had taken place here. One that meant at least some of his traps had worked. Well, at least attempted to work. Yet there were no chakra signatures present. Whoever had done this was either dead or long gone. He pulled himself out of the pool, careful to survey the ruins, crumbling buildings that had once held the forming village hidden in the waterfalls. Naruto had rather forcefully evicted them, simply by forcing them all out with sleeping gas, carrying out their sleeping forms using shadow clones and closing off their way in. Horrible. Yet Kakazu was a rather strong driving force behind the decision. Especially when the younger version of the assassin was one of the people he'd carried out of the village. There were fresh signs of battle all over the place. Even the massive tree that stood in the center of the ruins held signs of damage. He couldn't help the small grin. At least whoever had done it had gone through a hard time. He closed his eyes and tried to sense out any remnants of chakra that would give him a clue as to who was responsible. The strongest remnant was back in the water, where the three tails had been sealed. Naruto dove back into the water and swam to the secret opening by the roots of the tree. Well, not so secret if it had been found. He reappeared in a small pocket of air formed by the roots and frowned. The wooden box that held the three tails wasn't on the pedestal where he'd left it. In fact, almost all of the trap seals he'd placed in the pocket had been activated. Given that fact and the absence of an intruder, Naruto began to actually grow worried. He wasn't dealing with an amateur. He closed his eyes and probed the area with his sensing ability like never before. He couldn't say he was surprised to sense a mixture of Tatsumaki's chakra as well as Arashi's, but that was all he sensed. Whoever had done this had been careful to use no other chakra. So it had been their clumsiness in seals as well as their lack of knowledge on where the seals had been placed that had caused the seals to activate. If they'd used their own chakra, all of the seals would have been activated. That showed a level of seal understanding that Naruto was under the impression no one in this time period really had, given how no one had passed the trials. However, the trials were limited to Uzumaki alone. Uzumaki weren't the only ones who could study seals, and the Konoha library was well stocked. So essentially all he had was confirmation that there was a traitor, but no leads on as to who that traitor was. Naruto headed back to where Kakashi was, features grim and thoughts racing. There was one small victory. The box that held the three tails could only be opened by himself. Only himself. No amount of stealing chakra from his descendants would cut it. That much he knew for certain. Was he in danger because of that fact? It couldn't be a coincidence that the boxes were being taken now, when he was still alive. The idea was that when he died, no one would be able to open the boxes ever again. It would take the enemy knowing that only Naruto could open the box and therefore knowing who the Shodai had really been. That was an unpleasant thought. Unless they believed that Tatsumaki and Erasure were enough. Had they tried to open the box? Or had they dashed out of the caves before being caught in the seal? The frozen state was a welcomed one when Naruto carefully placed himself in the same spot as he'd been before. It meant he didn't have to deal with the racing thoughts and the dread beginning to pool in his chest. When Sasuke arrived in Konoha, he barely had enough energy left to wheeze out his message to a passing Uchiha police force member. Sakura, by some grace of Kami, had managed to keep up, but due to her low reserves she'd passed out the moment they passed the gate. The lack of experience in dire situations was rather evident in how the two handled the entire matter. However, it meant that they had arrived in a matter of 2 days, having pushed through rather than take the needed breaks. Sasuke and Sakura were placed on bed rest while Minato sent a petulant Menma and Kushina to retrieve Kakashi and Naruto. Menma had protested heavily, stating that he wasn't a sealing expert so his presence was unnecessary. Kushina had dragged the red-haired Jonin by the ear until he stopped protesting. When they arrived at the village hidden in the waterfalls, a shinobi greeted them with a curt nod. Minato had sent word to Takigakure, with a request to protect Naruto and Kakashi in exchange for taking care of the trap seal, since technically it wasn't Konoha's problem, and had Kakashi and Naruto not gotten trapped, Takigakure would have been forced to hire Konoha sealing masters. Kushina picked up a twig from the ground and tossed it at the seal. They had no idea where it started. The stick itself wouldn't get trapped, but it would be affected. There would be a hitch in its fall, an indication that time had been altered in some way. Seems to start right around here, Kushina muttered, approaching the line, which was almost directly where Naruto had gotten trapped. Kakashi, on the other hand, seemed to have made it a full stride inwards before freezing. I don't know why you insisted on bringing me along. I'm not worth it. Could have contacted Haruto-san instead, Menma grumbled. Kushina huffed and sent the Namikaze a glare. Oh yeah? Can't a mother spend time with her son? Besides, we both know that if you put your mind to it, you'd actually be pretty decent in sealing. Especially now that Naruto-kun's proven to be rather good at it. Menma didn't respond, looking towards his brother's frozen form. It was something of a surprise for the blonde to have gotten stuck, seeing as he'd been so oddly skilled in recent times. Perhaps those times really were random luck? The problem is, we can't see the sealing array unless we get into it. A wrong move would mean we're as trapped as Naruto-kun and Kakashi-kun. Kushina continued with a thoughtful frown. Again, why am I here? Menma drawled. Protection, maybe. Kushina had a habit of falling into her own thoughts. Hush, Menma, and make sure I don't get stuck like those two, Kushina stated while working through some carefully chosen hand signs. Menma didn't sigh like he wanted to. He might have looked more like his mother, but he knew sure as he was breathing that he preferred to work with his father. The Uzumaki way of things was often more action than thought. Menma was someone who relied heavily on plans. The ability to be innovative had skipped his genetic makeup entirely, unlike Naruto, who had it in spades. So he focused his attention on their surroundings, the rustle of his clothing a welcome sensation after the hard run, the wind cooling his body and bringing with it the sharp tang of decayed leaves, the smoky wisps of campfires and the gentle mist of the waterfall. The growing shadows meant they had little time left before the sun set, and he would perhaps need to assist his mother with some light-based jutsus. He'd perhaps need to make some dinner. Ration bars weren't needed if he had the ability to cook something. Naruto and Kakashi-san would be hungry as well. Kushina placed her hands on the ground, on the edge of the seal, and watched as her chakra spread around her and outwards, making the lines of the seal visible. The work of the Shodai bled into view with a swirl of lavender hues. They'd often wondered who had set the seals across the elemental nations. She had been studying enough of the archives to know Uzumaki Naruto's sealing work when presented to her. Seeing his work laid out before her was breathtaking as well as exhilarating. The current clan head would be excited too, and the confirmation was always nice. They'd assumed it was an Uzumaki, assumed it was the Shodai since there were few that had his prowess in sealing, but they hadn't known for sure. The seal was large, taking up a wide area, and remaining active by feeding off the natural energy around them. Kushina knew of natural energy, but she had no idea as to how to access it. In theory, she could cut off the natural energy supply and that should break the seal. In theory. She would need to change the trigger points of the seal array, and that wasn't easy, especially so with a seal as large as a small village. Glancing at Menma, she concluded that the boy was busying himself with other things, still petulant at having been dragged along. Perhaps another sealing master would have been preferable, but something the clan head had said made her wonder about Menma. Not to mention someone was extracting chakra. She didn't know if it was limited to the Uzumaki, but she had to assume that anyone was fair game until proven otherwise. Menma may have been a genius, but he was still her son, and she wanted to protect him in any way she could. Now for her other son. Taking a deep breath, Kushina began a new set of hand signs. It was a good thing she'd covered the Shodai section of the archives recently. The section was large and extensive, but also rather informative. She'd learned a lot from the former clan head. Even so, this was going to take a while. Minato stared at the report for a full minute after he'd finished reading it before putting it down with a deep sigh. In short, Naruto and Kakashi had been rescued. Taki was happy to have their old ruins back, and the elemental nations was short one less sealing wonder with no clue as to what was sealed in its center. Whatever it had been, it was gone, with no clues as to who was responsible. Sasuke and Sakura were fully recovered, having only really been exhausted from the flat-out run, while Kakashi and Naruto were exhausted, starving and in need of some rest. Team 7 has been placed on a week's leave, for now, Minato stated quietly, looking towards his wife who was staring out the window. Menma is already out on a new assignment, by his request. Kushina turned to him, a small frown tugging her lips as a crease formed between her eyebrows. That boy is ridiculous. He is stubborn like his mother, yes, Minato agreed. And he probably felt very useless on the retrieval mission, so it's more than likely that he wanted the mission to make up for it. He doesn't like being left on the sidelines. Just like his mother. Minato hummed, standing and walking over to Kushina. She closed the distance and pulled the blonde into a hug, his heart beat under her ear as she allowed herself to be comforted by his warmth. The strength in his arms reminded her that he was the Hokage for a reason, that whatever was coming couldn't possibly stand a chance against him. Whatever was in that cave, it's unlikely they'll be able to get the others. One can assume that it's a piece of a whole, given that there are other sealing arrays like it across the elemental nations. Kushina's tone was soft, distant. We're at a disadvantage though, because there are no records of those sealing sites in any of the Shodai's notes, so it's very likely that he didn't want those seals to be undone, and we have no idea as to how dangerous this thing is. Minato's hold tightened slightly. I have no doubt that we'll survive this. Konoha has been undefeated for the better part of 60 years. I refuse to be the Hokage who cannot uphold that peace. Minato's tone was firm, decided. Should we start breaking the seals ourselves to better protect the pieces? Kushina asked, tone thoughtful. No. The Shodai's seals are no joke. I'm not willing to risk lives just to protect something that's already pretty protected. Besides, they're not in Fire Country. We'd be trespassing if we attempted it without letting the other villages know, and we'd be broadcasting a potential weapon if we did. Mianto pulled away slightly, the frown on his features mirroring Kushina's. Fair point. Kushina agreed. For now, all we can do is send scouting teams to the other known locations, see if any of the others have been compromised. For now, one piece of 8 isn't going to overly concern me. Minato rubbed at his eyes. If there are more broken seals, we'll have to get involved anyway, to disable the security seals. The other villages can't deny us that. Want me to draw up a list of sealing ninja that can best assist in this task? Kushina asked, names already running through her mind. Minato nodded and walked back to his desk. Let's get to work. He smiled at Kushina. She was his everything, his whole world. He didn't think he'd have made it this far without her. He hadn't even wanted to be Hokage until she suggested it, suggested he could do more by being the Hokage. Looking back at the report, his smile dissolved. He refused to let Konoha down. Naruto stared at the ceiling of his room, contemplating his next move. He needed to find out who the traitor was, how much they knew, and if any of the other tailed beasts had been tampered with. He thought he'd managed to make his seals harder to break into, yet someone knew that Naruto was his son. Had that been made public knowledge? Not only did they know about that, but they knew that it took Naruto's chakra to get into and out of the seals relatively in one piece, leaving a period of Naruto's lifespan where the seals were vulnerable. There was literally no way to open those last seals without him. They could take the boxes all they wanted, but they would never be able to open them without his chakra and senjutsu. Did they know this? Was he in danger? He needed to keep his distance from Erashur and Tatsukuin, simply so that his presence didn't endanger them should the traitor know the truth. Technically Naruto was the most at danger, but the man was surely capable enough to look after himself. Was Menma in danger? Those two were the closest to his chakra signature. Was it close enough to be a problem? With a deep frown, Naruto decided that it was time to do a little digging, the illegal way. Night time came and Naruto shifted through the village, using a seal to make his chakra signature disappear. He was headed to the Uchiha district, intent on finding any records about Madara and his reason for leaving. It was highly possible that Hashirama being the Nidaime was the reason he left. The Uchiha Records room was meticulous, and given his role in creating the village, he was able to bypass all the security without a hitch. He fished through the files, finding the one on Uchiha family records. He browsed the records until the familiar names caught his interest. Uchiha Madara 28th clan head, not married, no known offspring. Uchiha Izuna 29th clan head, married, one known offspring. Uchiha Baru. Uchiha Baru 30th clan head, married, two known offspring. Uchiha Fugaku and Uchiha Hikaku. Uchiha Fugaku 31st clan head, married, three known offspring. Uchiha Itachi, Uchiha Sasuke, and Uchiha Urushi. Uchiha Hikaku, married, one known offspring. Uchiha Shursui. Naruto stopped reading as it wasn't all that helpful. It wasn't like a family tree, but it did show that Sasuke really was related to Izuna. Why didn't Sasuke know that? Or was it more likely that he didn't care? Clan was clan and everyone was related to someone in the clan, so it really didn't bother them maybe. Moving to another file, he found a clan member register. He flipped back a few pages until the names were more familiar and spotted Madara's name. Uchiha Madara, active clan member, deceased. Uchiha Izuna, active clan member, deceased. So the records showed they were no longer alive. Well, it was obvious, but still. Didn't make it hurt less. Glancing further down. Uchiha Baru, active clan member, unconfirmed. Uchiha Fugaku, active clan member, alive. Uchiha Hikaku, traitor, alive. Uchiha Shursui, active clan member, alive. The records didn't show much on purpose. For example, Uchiha Hikaku being a traitor was left unexplained. Probably detailed in a separate document. Didn't want to make it too easy for infiltrators, such as Naruto. There would be limited records all over the place. The complete records were stored in Tianai, where no sane shinobi would try and infiltrate, and where there were the most security measures. All the clans had agreed to it once they had proven the place to be literally impenetrable. Unless, of course, you were the man that built the place. That was neither here nor there. Naruto didn't want to go to Tianai unless he had to. Limited as the records were, it did show him that Madara wasn't considered a deserter, not like last time. He placed the register back where he'd found it. Was there anything else he wanted to know? Perhaps what the fight was about. However, that wouldn't be in the records room, would it? Moving through the records room as quickly as he could, Naruto spotted the address records and thumbed through the pages until he found the records dating back to the first inception of the village. He hadn't really known where Madara had lived. One could assume it was in the clan head's house, but Naruto wanted to make sure before he went about trying to break into Sasuke's house. With a sigh, Naruto stared at the printed letters that told him he really did have to break into the house where not only Uchiha Itachi lived, but also where Uchiha Fugaku lived. The man wasn't the head of the Konoha police force for nothing. Melting from one shadow to the next, he managed to successfully make his way from the records room to Sasuke's front door without being spotted. Wasn't that hard? No one was expecting a break-in. Peaceful times did have their disadvantages. More seals were needed, one to lighten his body weight so as to not make any noise on the floorboards, and one to take away his body odor no matter how faint it may be. It would be his lucky night if Itachi was away on a mission. Knowing Madara, the man may have kept a journal of sorts, and he may have hidden it somewhere in the house. If he truly left, however, then that journal would have left with him. The front door was unlocked. No one stupid enough to try rob the Uchiha, never mind the clan head. Closing his eyes, Naruto crouched down and placed his palms flat against the wooden floor. A pulse of chakra greeted his senses. Advantages of having created every building in the compound with chakra. He smirked as he used his senses to travel through the rooms of the house, looking for any sort of hidden compartment that may be of use to him. He frowned when his senses could not penetrate one room. Itachi's room. It was a dark void and a bright flow of familiar chakra signals. Why? Why did Itachi have his room sealed off? Surely if he was doing something odd, having a sealed room would be more of a red flag. Who was he hiding from? Or maybe, just maybe, that room had been a result of Madara, knowing the extent of Mito's sensing, of Tobirama's sensing and even Hashirama's sensing. Maybe, just maybe that room was Madara trying to hide something. With a sigh, Naruto approached the room, pausing at the door. He had a seal painted on his palm, just in case he needed to make a quick escape. One that would allow him to become invisible for a short space of time. Invisibility had the drawbacks of him being utterly blind, but he still had his ears and his sensing. He carefully pulled open the door, making his way as slowly as possibly into the room. Would being inside the room take away the void? He didn't move further than the doorway, taking note of Itachi's limp form. The boy was sleeping, his breathing even and light. However, that could change in an instant. Naruto didn't want to be around when that happened. So he pressed a hand to the wall, feeling nothing but the void. He crouched and pressed both palms to the floor. Nothing. Madara, or Itachi, was a crafty bastard. Naruto grit his teeth before carefully moving around the room, trying to spot anything that may look out of place. It was probably futile. If Madara hid anything in this place, Naruto wasn't going to find it. Not having to be this careful. Giving the room one last visual sweep, Naruto concluded that it was time to leave. Perhaps the Senju compound would provide answers. Or perhaps Tianai. As he moved to the door, Itachi suddenly stiffened. What the heck? Naruto was sure he hadn't made a sound. The Uchiha bolted upright and Naruto activated the seal on his palm before Itachi had time to turn to face him. Sharingan eyes moved over the room, Itachi's expression more alert than Naruto ever felt after having just woken up. The Namikaze stood perfectly still, not daring to even breathe while Itachi stood and moved to the open door with a frown. Red eyes sharpened and narrowed as he glanced out into the passageway, where Naruto had left the front door open to make leaving a little easier. He hadn't expected to be here long enough to alert the patrols to a problem via an open door that shouldn't have been open. Itachi's leg swung around so fast Naruto almost didn't get out of the way in time to avoid being hit. Itachi's expression smoothed out. I know you're there, he stated quietly, perhaps unwilling to wake his family. You may be invisible, but your chakra can't hide from the Sharingan. Naruto winced at the obvious weakness in his seal's design. He really should have known better. Yet he thought the chakra suppressor would help. At least it meant that Itachi didn't know who was in his room. Oh well, there was no helping it. Naruto dashed towards the door, knowing that once past Itachi it was a straight shot to the front door. Connecting a palm to Itachi's chest, sent the Uchiha stumbling backwards and gave Naruto the opportunity to make it through the doorway. Itachi wasn't far behind. He swept a leg out, and Naruto was forced to jump to avoid an unwelcomed meeting with the floor. The commotion woke Sasuke, who dashed into the passageway just ahead of Naruto, who was starting to think his Kami-given luck had been left behind in the past. Sasuke's Sharingan was active, and he too could make out the hazy mass of chakra standing in their passageway. Naruto was running out of time. His seal wouldn't last forever, and if it rubbed off in the fighting, then he was in even more trouble. What's going on, Aniki? Sasuke stated quietly, trying not to wake Sure. Intruder. A seal master by the look of things. Itachi replied, ever more astute than he needed to be. Well, guess Naruto was going to have to be an ass. His fingers flew through a series of hand signs, too fast for Sasuke or Itachi to react to the buildup of chakra their Sharingan picked up on. A sudden blinding light radiated throughout the clan head's house, a little stronger than what Naruto had intended for it to be. The blonde made a mad dash for the door, knowing full well that he just lit a bonfire-sized beacon for every guard in a 10-mile radius. Sasuke and Itachi hissed in pain, eyes squeezed shut and unable to chase after him for the moment. Naruto kept on running straight back to his house, a deep frown on his features as he couldn't help but think that he should have known better. Chapter 23. The next morning found Sasuke looking more than a little angry as he scowled at his breakfast. A breakfast he couldn't see thanks to the bandage wrapped tightly around his eyes. Both he and Itachi had been placed on extended medical leave. Itachi was carefully maneuvering his way through his food while Sasuke continued to scowl at his own. Naruto had made a large pretense of showing shock when Minato had woken him up just an hour earlier. Minato was standing a few feet away, quietly talking to Fugaku, who hadn't even had time to dress into his proper uniform. With a sigh, Naruto picked up Sasuke's toast and shoved it towards the petulant Uchiha, who only scowled further. "Just let me help you, team," Naruto grumbled distantly while Sasuke wondered at the name. Sasuke snatched the toast from his hand and took a forceful bite. "I don't need help eating breakfast. What I do need is the name of the person who dared to break into my house and why," Sasuke growled, looking far more like the Avenger Naruto was familiar with. "Did they leave any evidence?" Naruto asked innocently, eyebrows pulling together to further feign concern. He moved Sasuke's glass of milk closer to his hand when it appeared that Sasuke was more likely to knock it over than to actually manage to find it. "No. Other than the fact that they were using some high-end seals. I know you can buy seals from the Uzumaki, so it was either someone with a lot of money or it was someone really good at seals." Sasuke frowned, head tilting downwards. "Luckily Itachi woke up before anything could happen." Sasuke mentally shuddered at the thought of an intruder sneaking around Shiro's room. The youngest Uchiha had been sound asleep through the entire ordeal, only waking up when the bright flash had been activated. "They didn't have a lot of chakra, so it's possible that it was someone with a lot of money," Sasuke added, remembering the hazy figure that had been standing in the passageway, and how much chakra they'd had. Certainly not as much as Naruto had, and Naruto was only half Uzumaki. Minato turned away from Fugaku, the latter leaving the room while the former moved closer to the table. "Naruto-kun, I'm sending you to the Uzumaki compound. I need you to give this report to your mother. I'd go myself, but I'm already scheduled to be by the academy in an hour, and I need to check in with the office." Minato tossed the scroll towards him, and he caught it, wondering if he should read the words in the scroll. Probably not. Better to lay low after the failed Uchiha infiltration. Security would be heightened for a week or two at the very least. The academy? It had to be something important for him not to reschedule. Come to think of it, Shir-chan had absolutely insisted on going to the academy, despite what had happened to her brothers. Naruto stood and bowed to his father. "Understood." He turned to Sasuke, taking a moment to watch as the temporarily blinded Uchiha tried to eat an egg, missed and smeared it across his cheek instead. "See you later, Sasuke." He received an annoyed grunt in reply. Going to the Uzumaki compound could prove to be problematic. It was the heart of the biggest sensing clan in the village. If he reacted to anything oddly, it would raise suspicions. Luckily, he was more experienced than he looked. Still, he'd already messed up once. He couldn't afford to do so again. Running across rooftops, Naruto wondered just how different the Uzumaki clan would be. His experience with them since returning to the present was rather limited. Perhaps he'd see Haruto, get to see a bit more of the clan customs and such. He dropped down at the compound entrance and waved at the guards. They knew who he was, yet they weren't sure if they should let him in or not. "Yo, I'm here to see my mother. I have a report from the Hokage." He held up the report. They waved him through and he carried on towards the main hall. He couldn't use his sensing to find his mother. He didn't want it to be known that he was an adept sensor. He wanted to make it look like he was trying to find his mother the long way. "Hello?" he called as he entered the main hall, noting the low lighting and the somewhat empty hallway. He moved further in when he didn't immediately see anyone. He could sense a few people further in. Looking around as he walked, he was pleased to see that mostly, the compound hadn't changed other than to take on a more aged appearance. Closer to the chakra signatures he could tell that they were underground, and somewhat hazy, which was weird. It meant he couldn't make out who owned the chakra or not. They had to be low enough to be under the village's barrier. Which meant they'd made a hole in the barrier. That wasn't very smart. Naruto frowned. Why would the Uzumaki do something so stupid? He paused to look around, unsure of if he should carry on in this room, or walk around the compound until he happened upon someone who could help him locate his mother. He was about to turn around and do just that, when one of the chakra signatures moved away from the others and moved closer to the surface. As they re-entered the barrier, he felt his mother's familiar signature wash over him. He frowned but continued to pretend to leave. Naruto-kun? His mother called to him as she shined into the main hallway, a few meters behind the blonde. Ka-chan? Naruto turned to his mom with a look of surprise. He wasn't acting either. He hadn't expected the shunshin. He walked towards her with a smile. I have a report from Tu-chan. He held out the scroll and Kushina took it, her chakra showing her confusion. Perhaps she hadn't heard about the infiltration. Naruto waited, not sure if was meant to get a reply or not, as his mother read through the report. Her chakra grew grimmer as she did so, with a hint of concern. I'm sorry, Naruto-kun. I appear to be rather unable to assist in this matter. You'll have to tell your father to rule out Uzumaki sales. We don't sell flash seals. At least not one that could blind a Sharingan. We don't even know how to make something like that. Kushina rolled up the scroll, her features worried. Naruto kept his emotions carefully in check. He allowed worry to creep in, as that would be a natural response. Then we're dealing with a sealing master. How many of those are there outside of the compound? He asked, moving a hand to his chin thoughtfully. Not sure. Anyone can study sealing. It's just that the Uzumaki are the best at it, so not many other people bother. It's also a time-consuming craft to learn. Kushina was stumped. He could feel it in her chakra. At this point, we're going to have to wait and see. As much as it pains me to admit it, without any other further evidence we're out of options. They didn't use a weapon, so we can't identify the craftsmanship, and they didn't use any jutsu other than seals. We don't even know if it was an outside attack or a traitor from the inside. Without knowing what the person was after, it's even less likely that we'll catch them. They could have been going after Shichan. She's young enough to be manipulated for her Sharingan, and her family has already proven to be immensely proficient Sharingan users. Kushina rolled up the report and tucked it away. I'll look through the records of known Uzumaki seals and see if perhaps there are any on invisibility or flashes. Could one of the weaker flash seals have been modified? Naruto proposed the question as though he too was trying to solve the mystery. No. I imagine the base seal would have been completely different. Anything powerful enough to blind a Sharingan would have been pure chakra, since the Sharingan sees the chakra pathways. Therefore it's entirely plausible that the flash was nothing more than an outburst of chakra. Kushina muttered. She seemed distant. You should get back to your father. I'm sure Fugaku-sama is anxious enough as it is. Any information at this point would be most welcome. Naruto watched his mother Shunshin from the room, no doubt going back to where she had come from. How did she know about the Sharingan? Madara had stressed absolute privacy on all Sharingan-related information. Coincidence? Or had the current Uchiha been a little more generous with their information? Naruto didn't linger, knowing it would appear suspicious to his mother. If she was even still looking out for his chakra. Perhaps he was looking in the wrong places. Perhaps this traitor wasn't a traitor at all? There was a possibility that this was an outside source, an infiltrator. As he exited the main hall, he sensed a familiar chakra signature walking towards him. He turned towards Tatsumaki as he rounded the corner. Shouldn't you be at the academy? Naruto asked, knowing full well that yes, the boy should. I overslept. Tatsumaki replied innocently, adding a grin and everything. I was just about to dash off when I saw you. Naruto sighed and rubbed the back of his head. Alright, I'll walk you there and maybe I can explain to Ichiraku-sensei. He had no idea as to what he was going to say though. Naruto paused for a moment, thinking that perhaps not explaining anything was better than even trying, before shrugging and lifting Tatsumaki up onto his back, ignoring the boy's squawk of surprise. Let's make sure we don't even have to explain anything. Naruto grinned, focusing his chakra towards his feet where he'd have better access to the village seal matrix, and then immediately seeking out the academy. Naruto was careful to make it look like an ordinary Shunshin as he disappeared from the Uzumaki compound and reappeared directly in front of Ichiraku-sensei, who immediately backed away, kunai in hand. Sorry about that, Ichiraku-sensei, Naruto stated nervously, rubbing the back of his head. My aim is a bit off. I was going for the classroom door. And Naruto? Iruka quickly put the kunai away, looking more than a little shocked. Tatsuko-kun was late for class, Naruto added with a grin. So I thought I'd give him a hand, make an honest student out of him. To which Iruka snorted. Honest student? Honestly, Naruto-kun, you're the last one to talk. Tatsumaki hopped away from Naruto's back, his grin so large Naruto was sure he was going to split his cheeks. That was so cool! When do I learn how to do that? Naruto left the boy to run to his friends to tell them all about it. Sure, on the other hand, gave Naruto a narrowed gaze look. Twice in one morning, Naruto baka. You're really trying to ruin my day. Naruto was starting to think that girl was psychotic. Iruka shook his head and sighed. You're just going to make my job harder doing things like that. But there was a smile on his face, so Naruto just grinned. I'll stay and help out. Knock a few heads together if I need to, Naruto offered. In truth, he didn't really have anything else to do for the immediate moment. His father had mentioned he was coming to the academy, so he could relay the message from his mother when he arrived. Iruka studied him for a moment, his gaze thoughtful. A memory came to mind, and Naruto wondered if he should say something. You know, Iruka-sensei, you always did look out for me the best you could. Naruto smiled distantly. I know that I failed the academy graduation test and that it caused you a heck load of anxiety because of it. But don't worry. When I say I'm going to help you out, I don't mean that you'll have an extra headache on your hands. I've grown up a bit since the academy. Iruka looked startled for a moment, his gaze moving towards Naruto and out of his thoughts. Then he relaxed a moment later with a soft smile tugging at his lips and a slight blush deepening the color on his cheeks. Am I that readable, Naruto-kun? Naruto just grinned wider. He couldn't very well tell Iruka that it wasn't that he was that readable, it was more like Naruto was just that good of a censor. Better to let him make his own deductions. Well, I guess you can tag along. They're going to be a handful either way. We're trying something new today. Iruka sighed wearily. Naruto's curiosity peaked full force and he couldn't help but wonder what the academy was trying. Perhaps that was why his father was coming. We've been working on it for months, so the kids will be really excited. What are we doing? Naruto asked, looking towards the students, who sure enough, looked ready to bounce off the walls. Sure-chan was with Tatsuko-kun, the two seeming to be comparing something. We've been given special permission to try out the Uzumaki Taijutsu training grounds, Iruka stated with a proud grin. First time ever that it'll be open to those outside of the clan for a few decades. The Uzumaki Taijutsu training grounds, huh? Naruto was quite familiar with it as he had built it himself. He was rather smug about that achievement. It was similar to the testing grounds Mito's father had taken him to all those years ago. Only this was meant to be more of an obstacle course, rather than a test. He'd even included a multitude of monitoring seals that would increase the difficulty of the course as a person trained so that they could continue to use the course. It was a live sealing array, so to speak. It changed and evolved as the participant did, really pushing them to their limits. Just before being sent back to the present, Naruto was the proud holder of the course record. He was a little confused as to why it had been closed off to the other clans, but things had changed in the last 50-odd years. So really he couldn't say why until he got there. Awesome! Sounds exciting indeed. Can't say I blame the kids. Naruto grinned. This might be fun. Maybe he could also give it a try. See if he could beat his old score. Probably not just yet. The Taijutsu training ground wasn't situated in the clan compound. It was right next to Training Ground 7. It was fairly large, with a small arena built around it. It used to be a source of healthy competition during the early formation of the village. A bonding experience, so to speak. Alright class, line up. The Hokage should be here any moment. Iruka addressed the gleeful students, and they immediately moved into 2 straight lines. Naruto couldn't help the nervous sweat drop at the thought of disobeying Iruka-sensei. As those summoned, Minato arrived in a flash of yellow, and Naruto was pleased at the reminder that his father had learned and built upon Tobirama's technique. Yo, Two-chan! Naruto waved. Kaa-chan told me to tell you that there aren't any Uzumaki flash seals sold to the public strong enough to blind a Sharingan. She's going to look into the seal directory and see if there's anything on invisibility and flash seals. Naruto didn't even give the poor man time to greet Ichiraku. Ah. Thank you, Naruto-kun. He didn't miss a beat, and Naruto silently commended the fifth Hokage. Minato smiled warmly and asked, "Are you joining us today?" Naruto nodded. "Sounded fun." "Alright, Ichiraku-sensei, the marker has been set up, so if you could all please hold hands." Minato turned to the Chunin instructor, who bowed slightly in greeting. "Okay, class, remember how we practiced." Ichiraku watched as the students nodded and grasped the hand of their peers. Ichiraku smiled and took hold of the hand of the child in front before offering his hand to the Hokage with a deep blush. Minato chuckled. "Yosh! Alright, Naruto-kun, you take my other hand." Naruto nodded and gripped his father's hand tightly. He'd seen the damage that Tobirama sustained getting this jutsu wrong. Minato had taken the jutsu far if he was able to transport this many. The activation came without warning. A slight jolt that was felt all the way to his chakra core, and suddenly they were standing in front of the Uzumaki training grounds. Naruto let out an explosive breath with a laugh. "That's the weirdest feeling." Minato chuckled again. "Oh yeah? I almost gave the technique a skip because of it." All of the students were handling the jump with varying degrees of nausea or laughter, and Naruto couldn't help the amusement at their predicament. Tatsumaki seemed to have recovered the fastest and ran over to Naruto, looking as though he was about to explode with happiness. "That was so cool! Better than your jump, Naruto-ni." "Ma, I thought my jump didn't have as many drawbacks." Naruto scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Eh? But your jump was just a shunshin," Tatsumaki argued. Naruto pretended to consider the argument before slumping his shoulders in defeat. "I guess you're right, Tatsu-kun. The boy would maybe understand that it wasn't just a shunshin. One day. Maybe. Better to leave it for now before his father grew suspicious." Ichiraku looked pale, but he did his best to put on a stern face so that the students would fall into line without too much trouble. "Alright, class, we're going to do this exercise for most of the day. There will be an Uzumaki seal modder helping us today, so I want all of you on your best behavior." "Hi, sensei." The learners chorused while Minato walked over to aforementioned sealing master, who happened to be Haruto. The blonde Uzumaki greeted the Hokage with a short bow, quietly going over the logistics for the day before Minato nodded and opened a door that led to the seating part of the training ground. Naruto caught a glimpse of a still blind folded Itachi before she squealed and rushed over to her brother. Naruto shook his head with a smile. He felt sorry for any suitor that she may have in the future given her overprotective brothers. Was Sasuke here as well? Stretching out his senses, he concluded that no, he wasn't. "Alright, class, let's move towards the seats. You'll be going in one at a time, so let's all be patient and work on having a good time." Ichiraku ushered the learners towards the door and Naruto followed, content to watch. However, Minato grabbed his jacket sleeve as he passed. "Hold on, Naruto-kun, you'll be the one demonstrating. Help to show the students what to expect." "Hi!" Naruto wondered what the plan had been before he decided to join the academy field trip for the day. Itachi maybe, who was now temporarily blinded. He walked over to Haruto, who greeted him politely. "Naruto-san. Good to see you again. I look forward to your participation today, as someone who completed the trials." The reminder made Naruto sigh. He still had to see what was happening inside the clan. Hi. I'm glad there weren't any lasting repercussions for Tatsu-kun." Naruto nodded his head as he grinned. "Shall we begin?" Haruto asked. Naruto shrugged. He was ready to go when everyone else was. Up in the stands, Minato watched carefully. He'd been glad to see Naruto, and not really because it was his son. Selfishly, he wanted to see what the course would reveal about his son's abilities. It was hard to fool the sensing seals at the entrance. As each participant walked in, their chakra was automatically scanned and the level of the course set based on the information this scan provided. It was a good opportunity to see if what Naruto had been displaying was luck or skill. The entrance to the course opened and Naruto waited a moment, listening to Haruto-san. "Alright class, Naruto-kun is going to go first to give you all a demonstration of how the course works," Ichiraku instructed loudly enough for all the excited children to hear. "If you see that screen over there, there's a list of the current top 10 performers that have ever taken this course." Ichiraku pointed towards a screen where the first name displayed was Uzumaki Naruto, the Shodai Hokage. Underneath that was Senju Hashirama, the Nidaime Hokage. High standards to work up towards indeed. The letters of names were shimmering slightly, displayed in the same blue hue of chakra, showing that this entire course relied on chakra. Naruto stepped forward and a blue chakra barrier activated, washing over the Namikaze for a moment before disappearing again. A screen opposite Naruto displayed 2 words and a number that made his heart freeze. Uzumaki Naruto, 1 SD. Was it too much to hope that no longer having Kurama influence his chakra would have made enough of a difference that the scanners didn't recognize him as the same person? Minato watched as Naruto's face paled, his eyes growing wide and panicked. He noted the screen, his own mind racing at the implications. They had seconds, mere seconds to act before the course activated. Minato sprang to his feet and rushed towards the railing that separated the seats from the course grounds. "Get out, Naruto!" he yelled, his own voice sounding frantic. Naruto spun on his heel and tried to do just that, but a barrier warped into place, forcing Minato to let go of the railing. The slight buzz told him that touching the barrier wouldn't be a good idea. "Two-chan!" Naruto yelled, his breathing beginning to speed. "I can't do this!" He wasn't exaggerating. He knew exactly what was about to happen. He'd adjusted the settings for his course runs. The barrier was so that those watching didn't get hurt from flying debris. The only way to shut it off was to complete the course, and what used to be a slightly workout for him was now a death trap. He hadn't had time to train his body and his chakra reserves to his previous level. There was no way this was going to end well. The course didn't have a failsafe when it was him, because foolishly that's exactly how he designed it. It wouldn't shut off even if his heart stopped beating. Worst case scenario, he was a decomposing corpse in a training field that would never be available to anyone else again. Best case scenario, he made it out of here alive. Miraculously. His best hope to do that was to spam high chakra cost maneuvers to get to the other side of the course and hit the off switch before getting beaten to hell and back by the actual course. Seemed doable if he considered his high chakra reserves. How much chakra would he need to move as fast, if not faster, than the course? Naruto closed his eyes and focused on his breathing. He could do this. He just had to be fast. There were students watching after all, and they didn't know what was going on. They didn't know there was a problem. Minato watched as Naruto grew calm, his eyes becoming determined. Had he come up with a plan? He moved to Ichiraku and said as quietly as he could, "Keep the kids calm for now. Tell them Naruto's on a much higher setting. Really emphasize that they won't have the same experience." Ichiraku nodded, having also gauged the seriousness of the situation. Minato moved towards Haruto, who was trying to get the system override working. His eyes were clenched shut in concentration, both palms on the ceiling array that controlled the course. It was glowing a faint turquoise, but otherwise, nothing moved. "I've managed to delay the start, but I'm not able to turn it off. Short of destroying the entire course, there's nothing we can do," Haruto admitted, his tone conveying his concern. The floor of the course shifted and Naruto immediately sprang into action, moving towards the other end of the course with a burst of speed that could only be aided by chakra. The course was largely run on Earth-style manipulations. A column of earth sprang at Naruto's right, and he avoided it by jumping up, only to be slammed by a column coming from his left. Minato heard the snap of the bone in Naruto's arm breaking and winced. Naruto didn't even cry out, and Minato wondered how much more the boy would be able to take. "Try again, Haruto-san, please." Minato flicked his gaze toward the seal master, inwardly wondering what good he was if he wasn't able to help. As though sensing his inner thoughts, Haruto responded, Usually I'd be able to shut this down immediately. Hell, there shouldn't even be a barrier. But the Shodai made modifications for his run. I can't fix this. Only the Shodai can. But you're his son? Surely your chakra means something to the seal? Minato knew enough about seals and chakra signatures to know that family had extremely similar chakra signatures. How did Naruto's chakra get confused for the Shodai's was anyone's guess at this point, but for now getting him out of there was the biggest priority. Haruto shook his head. No. My father's chakra was something else entirely. In the arena, Naruto closed his eyes and relied completely on his sensing. That was the only way he managed to make it through the mountainside course all those years ago. Keeping his body loose would allow him the ability to react almost immediately. He needed to move instinctually. That was the only way this was going to work. Feeling the flow of the course was almost cheating, the barrier making it a little harder than it would have normally been, but he could sense enough. Twisting his body to the left, and ducking low to avoid 3 columns of earth almost caused him to pull several ligaments. He may have been using chakra to aid his movement, but his body hadn't adjusted to the daring manipulations, and as such, a long recovery period after this was highly probably. 4 pillars forced him to form a Rasengan to smash his way through. Luckily, this present version of himself had figured out how to do it without shadow clones. Ducking into a newly formed ditch meant he avoided a blast of flame, but he felt the heat scorching his skin. Too close. The ditch shifted and he wasn't fast enough to duck out of it before he felt himself being flung into the air, where gusts of wind sliced into his skin, Naruto doing the best he could in covering his face. When he landed running to avoid the spikes shooting at him from all directions. Faster, faster, faster. Not fast enough. A spike dug into his shoulder, knocking the air right out of him, but he kept running. He had to. Minato bit his bottom lip as Haruto once again tried to override the seal. Naruto was burning though chakra at an alarming rate, too full of adrenaline to really register the damage his body was taking. He himself had tried to get into the barrier using his mark on Naruto's jacket, but it was useless. The barrier was solid. He pressed his palm to the ground, trying to see if he could go from underneath, but the barrier once again prevented any interference. Naruto was on his own, trying to get to a small ledge high above the course floor, where the seal to deactivate the entire thing was located. The closer Naruto got, the more vicious the course became. Right now the blonde was jumping from one flying rock to the other, the ground shaking as each rock hit the ground. The barrier's purpose became somewhat positive as it prevented any of the debris from hitting the students. A sudden wave of water crashed into Naruto, sending him several feet backwards and further away from the ledge. Minato was keeping careful track of his chakra. He was running out fast. With the speed that the course was moving at, this would be over in minutes. Naruto! Minato had to physically hold himself back, lest he get too close to the barrier. Naruto lay on the ground panting and exhausted, feeling the course take a moment to reabsorb the water that had just cracked several of his ribs. Whatever he did next had to be enough to get him to the other end. He was out of chakra, out of time. The longer the course went, the more difficult it was becoming. Underneath him, the swirling chakra of the village reminded him that perhaps he could try one last thing. Taking a deep calming breath, he stilled his body, absorbing the senjutsu around him. He wouldn't have long. 10 seconds at most, and therefore he had to absorb enough to get to the switch. With a large burst of speed that really would be a last resort, Naruto dashed towards the ledge. It was a last resort because the output of chakra far exceeded his chakra coil's capacity, straining them to an almost breaking point. If the burst was too much, he'd never manipulate chakra ever again. For a moment, a tiny, uninterrupted moment, Naruto was faster than the course. His fingers grasped the ledge and he pulled himself up with a desperation only felt a handful of times in one's life before slamming his free hand onto the seal that would end this nightmare. The active chakra in the course grounds froze before completely disabling, leaving nothing but the general chakra that ran through the village. Naruto felt his body relax as he let go of the ledge, his body falling the floor with a painful bone-jarring thud. The barrier disintegrated and Naruto suddenly felt stupidly happy. He'd done it. He'd managed to survive his own foolish course. It had definitely been more challenging than any other time he'd done it. But he'd managed. Despite himself, he began to laugh. "Two-chan!" he gasped between laughs. "Was that how you feel every time you performed the narration no jutsu?" He couldn't deny how exhilarating it had been. He was utterly exhausted, unable to move more than a few inches, but he couldn't stop the grin on his face. The recovery time for this adventure was so worth the trouble he'd gone through. Minato sighed and felt his entire body droop as the tension drained. His heart thundered painfully in his chest. He hadn't felt so useless in such a long time. That boy was going to give him a heart attack. The only other time something similar had happened was the day Naruto had been born. The entire village had lit up like a Christmas tree, Minato later learning that the village did that every time the Hokage left and came back. Sort of a greeting, an acknowledgement of their presence. It also served to let all the village occupants know. It had been implemented by the Shodai as a way to raise morale during the early stages of the village's formation, where the Shodai was required to leave the village often in order to resolve conflicts brought on by those that weren't too happy about the village's existence. Naruto felt the disturbance in the village's chakra a fraction of a second before the jutsu hit, coming from the village itself. How was that possible? The traitor? His heart thundered in his ears as he tried to force his body to move, to get out of the training ground. Two-chan! Invasion! Was all he could manage before the jutsu activated. Naruto's laughter cut off suddenly so he could shoot his warning, his arms feebly trying to support his body weight so that he could stand. Something was wrong. Minato should have taken him to the hospital the moment the barrier went down. Minato rushed towards Naruto only to be blown backwards by a wind jutsu. The same jutsu launched Naruto into the air, the boy unable to do anything with his chakra exhaustion as a void seal suddenly opened in the training ground floor, a dark swirling mass of unknown origins. Minato didn't wait for the jutsu to stop, twisting around and getting a kunai from his pouch. He threw the kunai as hard as he could towards Naruto's limp form. He reappeared next to Naruto just as the wind jutsu cut off and chakra wire shot out of the void, wrapping around Naruto's ankle. Minato tried to grab Naruto's jacket, his hand, the waistband on his pants, anything, before Naruto was yanked towards the void in the floor. If Naruto was pulled in, there was nothing he could do. He had no idea where that seal led. He wasn't fast enough, as all he'd managed was to brush Naruto's fingers, watching as Naruto disappeared into the seal, a hand reaching towards him. Naruto sensed the chakra coming from the seal. He knew that being taken would not end well for him. He needed to get away. But he had nothing left. He had no way of getting free. Not in his current state. All he could do was watch as his father failed to grasp hold of him, as his father grew further away from him, as the void swallowed his vision. A hand grasped his, a chakra chain shooting past him, a sharp blade at the end. The chakra wire around his ankle was cut, and he was yanked upwards so hard his shoulder dislocated. He found himself being carried away from the void seal fast enough to blue his vision. Who? Naruto? You okay? They'd stopped, the void no longer open as Haruto placed a seal over it, forcing it to close before the enemy on the other side could come through. Kakashi-sensei? Naruto asked, feeling nothing but pain, his world a dizzy blur of inconsistencies. When did you get here? Distantly he felt Sasuke and Sakura's chakra, Menma's too. Minato landed next to Kakashi, features grim. He's going into shock. We better get him to the hospital. Minato grasped Naruto's shoulder and Kakashi's arm, preparing to jump them to the emergency room. Haruto rushed over to them, eyes moving towards Naruto's ankle. It seems I accidentally cut Naruto as well. My deepest apologies, Hokage-sama. Don't apologize, Haruto-san. Without your quick thinking and chakra chains, I don't know what we would have done. It was the last thing Minato said to those around them before the world lurched and they were standing in the hospital. Get me Tsunade! Minato yelled as a flurry of activity greeted their arrival. Naruto's brain finally gave out. The last thing he managed to comprehend was that the person on the other side of that void had been none other than Uchiha Madara, and that his chakra hadn't been threatening at all. Chapter 24. The room was dark when he woke and relatively free of people. Only his mother was there, sleeping in the chair next to his bed. Naruto wasn't exactly disappointed. He needed the time to think. First, how was Madara still alive? Second, how had he known where Naruto was? Third, would he try it again? Fourth, did he have inside help? To the first question, there were a number of possibilities. None of them ones he could prove until he got to speak to Madara directly. It would explain why the village allowed the invasion in the first place. Madara, as a key founding member, would have his chakra keyed into the seal matrix. He'd have no trouble coming and going. To the second question, Madara may have known where he was using the village seal matrix, but that was unlikely given that in order to use the matrix as Naruto did, one needed to be a sealing master. So it was more likely that Madara had someone on the inside which would answer the fourth question. The man was still considered part of the clan, but perhaps not part of the village. Would he try it again? Maybe not like that. Everyone would be too on edge now. His father wouldn't allow him out of the village, and he'd probably have a security detail on his butt the moment he moved in any direction. Well, at least until everyone was sure that there wasn't a threat anymore. Problem was, with Madara still around, and the tailed beast seals being broken, Naruto was in desperate need of finding out just how many were still left, and how many had been stolen. Madara knew what was in those boxes, and worse still, knew that Naruto was needed to open those boxes. Taking a moment to assess his body, Naruto concluded that he was going to be in the hospital for a little while yet. Without Kurama he wouldn't heal as quickly, and there was only so much medical ninjutsu could do, even if it had been Tsunade treating him. Right now, with regards to Madara, the only thing he knew for certain was why the Uchiha was after him. There was no way that Madara could know about his Shodai awareness, so to speak. If Madara knew what Hashirama had done, he had no way of knowing if Naruto would pop up as a separate entity, or if he'd integrate into his younger self's mind as he had done. More importantly, there was no way for the man to know when he'd arrive. Not definitely. Hashirama could have done all the calculations he wanted, but at the end of the day, time travel was a fickle thing. If he'd been just slightly off, then Naruto might not have survived the trip at all. Therefore, with certainty, he could say that Madara wanted the Naruto of this time. The genin dead last son of the fifth Hokage, not the Shodai. If they couldn't get chakra from Tatsumaki and Erasure anymore, then Naruto was the next best place to try. Only that hadn't worked. So what would Madara do now? Assuming Madara had been the one to place those seals in the first place. Minato approached Naruto's room deep in thought. He had a moment in his schedule and he wanted to visit his son. Naruto had been in the hospital for almost 2 weeks now, giving the nurses a hard time, trying to escape every other day. The only reason the boy was lying there at all was thanks to Haruto-san's paranoia. The man had placed summoning seals similar to the Flying Thunder God seals on Arashi's teammates in case of emergencies. Kakashi's speed and Haruto's chains had saved his son. Kakashi's quick intellect also being a key factor. He'd arrived, taken in the situation, and reacted a second after, getting to Naruto with the same speed that made the Chidori possible. More than what Minato had been able to do. The blonde Hokage poked his head around the door to see Naruto sitting in the bed, staring out the window. "Naruto-kun!" Minato greeted, glad to have caught the teen at a quiet moment. Apparently Tatsumaki had taken to visiting Naruto every day. Naruto turned towards Minato and smiled. "Tu-chan, I heard you were getting pretty bored. Feel like going on a small trip?" Minato grinned apologetically at his son, trying to convey more than what he'd said in words. Naruto sensed his chakra, felt his father's regret at having not come sooner as well as not having been able to do anything to rescue him in the first place. "Like this?" Naruto raised a brow, gesturing at himself and the plain hospital clothing he wore. Minato shrugged. "All the important bits are covered. We're just jumping somewhere. I'll have you back in 10 minutes. 20 tops. Minato even gave a thumbs up. Does Tsunade-bachan know? Naruto narrowed his gaze and Minato laughed. Yes. She said going out under supervision would be good for you. Besides, we're going to a sealing wonder site. I thought you'd be excited for that. Naruto stood and stretched. If she said I can go, then I probably won't need to be in the hospital for much longer. He grinned and pulled his shoes out of the cupboard next to the bed. He hopped over to his father as he pulled them on. Not having Kurama helping to heal his wounds had made a serious impact on his recovery rate. While still impressive, it was nowhere near his previous levels. Annoyingly enough, Minato gripped his shoulder and the world lurched to the side before tipping back into place, and suddenly a blast of sand covered his entire right side. Naruto covered his mouth and squeezed his eyes shut to avoid getting sand in unwanted places. Sooner then. Ota-san. Menma's curt politeness explained where Minato's marker had been for him to have made the jump. We managed to uncover the sealing matrix and disable the security seals. It's the same as all the others we've been to so far. It seemed the older of the Namake's offspring was choosing to ignore Naruto's presence. Naruto opened his eyes slowly, taking in the vast golden landscape. Distantly he felt the razor-sharp chakra signatures of Sunanin. One of them was oddly familiar. He couldn't quite place it, however. Did this one give you as much trouble as the other three? Minato asked, accepting a report that Menma held out to him. His earlier assessment of leaving the seals alone was proving to be troublesome. The Shodai seals were being broken in quick succession, almost as though there was a time element involved. No. At this point we've devised countermeasures that are proving to be effective. The Shodai may have been a brilliant seal master, but his seals are somewhat predictable. Menma shrugged, not even batting an eye at the insult he so casually gave. Naruto, on the other hand, had to stop himself from frowning. His seals were not predictable. Each one had been designed differently. For example, the one in Suna was designed to bury the intruder in a sand pit before hardening the sand with a lightning jutsu. How were they all being avoided? Where is it? Minato asked, looking around but seeing nothing but sand. Menma waved them towards the Sunanin chakra signatures. This way. He glanced at Naruto before asking, Is he supposed to be here? I thought the fresh air would do him good. Minato shrugged. Truthfully, it was the only solution he'd come up with that enabled him to spend time with his son. Naruto trailed along behind his father and older brother, letting his thoughts wander. Konoha didn't really have an alliance with Suna, but there was a strong bond between the villages from Naruto's time as the Shodai. Would that bond weaken over time? As it was, Konoha didn't need the help. By poaching clans from all over the elemental nations, they'd easily become the largest and most powerful. If the other 4 villages banded together? Well, then perhaps they'd have a problem. As they neared the site, Naruto felt the residual chakra of his seal matrix snapping in the air. It had been freshly broken, and violently at that. The previous sealing wonder he'd visited was different. It had been carefully analyzed and even more carefully worked through to ensure the best possible outcome, with the only drawbacks having been accidental. Was Madara running out of time? He wasn't a seal master, last Naruto checked. The sealing site was in utter chaos. Naruto was at a loss for words. The entire area was a complete ruin. He was surprised he hadn't seen it as soon as they'd arrived. To be fair, desert heat waves were pretty misleading. The Sunanin he'd sensed earlier approached wearily, having been assisting with the clean-up as best they could. Naruto noticed the red hair first, and the familiar chakra signatures suddenly stood out in more ways than the brightness of the strands ever could. Gaara. Smiling. Good afternoon, Hokage-sama. Gaara gave a short bow. On behalf of my father and the Hidden Sand, we'd like to express our deepest gratitude for your assistance. He apologizes for not coming himself, but has some urgent matters to attend to. Gaara had never looked so peaceful. Naruto took a moment to simply gawk at the teen. It was a wonder he was even alive. After all, his entire existence had been to become a Jinchuriki. Then again, Menma existed and that hadn't happened before, so anything went. It was good to note that he didn't have the scar on his forehead. No worries, Gaara-kun. I know how hard you tried to convince him to come. Minato chuckled, seeming to know the red-haired Sunanin well. Perhaps they knew each other from diplomatic meetings. This is my youngest son, Naruto-kun. Minato gestured towards Naruto, whose jaw was still hanging. Please excuse his appearance. He's supposed to be in the hospital, recovering from some serious injuries. I just thought this would be a great opportunity to introduce you to Naruto. Gaara is the Yondaime Kazekage's youngest son, and also training to become the next Kazekage. Naruto schooled his features and offered his hand. Good to meet you. He added a large grin for good measure. And you? Gaara gave a small smile, while shaking his hand. Are you sure you're supposed to be out of the hospital? Naruto shrugged. If I haven't collapsed yet, I should be good to go. All pleasantries aside, what can you tell us about the seal? Minato asked, features turning grim. Gaara turned towards the ruin, and so did Naruto, seeing the destruction around them in the way that no one else could. This had been the site for Shikaku. Naruto had used Earth style to create a structure underneath the sand dunes. Something that wouldn't draw attention. Then he'd carefully hidden it with the sand as well as placed numerous seals. In front of them was a crater. One deep enough to have completely decimated the Earth-style structure he'd created. It was anyone's guess as to whether or not they'd found the box. Blowing the entire place to hell meant they had run the risk of losing what they'd come here for in the explosion. It happened 2 nights ago, Gaara stated. The explosion was big enough that it reached us all the way in the village, both visually and physically. The good news is, there wasn't any lasting damage to the village's infrastructure. Unfortunately, whoever did it was gone by the time we arrived. Big enough to completely destroy the security seals, huh? Naruto muttered. Even though seals never truly disappeared, if you took away the surface they were created on, then most of the time it stopped the seal from being able to function. Effective, even if it wasn't very elegant. Problem was, elegant was Madara's style. This large-scale level of destruction was completely different from what he'd have expected of the Uchiha. Then again, it had been a couple decades. Things could change. I see. No evidence either. The explosion wasn't created using chakra, so we can't even track it using sensor-type shinobi. Whoever we're dealing with is far more capable than we thought. How do the Uchiha tie into this? Minato scratched at his chin thoughtfully. If I may, I believe that the Uchiha incident is perhaps a separate incident. There is nothing to suggest that whoever is breaking the seals is the one who broke into the Uchiha district 2 weeks ago. Menma stated softly, eyes fixed on Naruto. How's the investigation going? Naruto asked, not at all disturbed by the calculating gaze. No one tells me anything. And for good reason. We're currently in front of shinobi from another village. Why would I tell you top-secret details of an ongoing investigation right in front of them? It wasn't a question, and for once Menma had some emotion in his tone. Problem was, it was anger. Gaara had enough decorum to look embarrassed and coughed into his hand, pretending not to be listening. Excuse my sons. They don't get along very well. Ever. Minato stated blandly. Although Menma does have a point. Naruto just grumbled under his breath about not being the one who brought up the Uchiha incident in the first place. Still, this was worrisome on a whole new level. Kurama would be laughing at him if he was here to see just how badly Naruto's tailed beast sealing plan was going. If I may ask, I heard that this sealing site wasn't the only one that's been destroyed. Gaara asked, looking at the ruins again. Naruto frowned, wanting to know more himself, since he was unable to go look unless Minato was planning more trips. Highly unlikely, though. Hi! Of the 8, we've been to 5, and all 5 of them have been compromised. It stands to reason that this has been happening for some time now. Menma answered, looking more frustrated than Naruto thought he should. What claim did Menma have in all this? It's highly possible that the other 3 have also been compromised. Or will be in the coming weeks. Hearing that only made Naruto's heart heavy. He walked closer to the edge of the crater, taking in the sight with growing unease. The brutality of it all spoke of a desperation that should not exist in such peaceful times. Madara, what have you done? Naruto whispered to himself, knees going weak as he realized just what was happening. What happened to our dream? What happened to everything we were working towards? Hashirama, me and you. We worked so hard only for you to go and do this? Why? Naruto-kun? Minato asked, his tone conveying his concern. Do you know what this is? Naruto schooled his features, ensuring that none of his thoughts showed on his face, and replied, No. I don't, but whatever it was, someone didn't want it getting out, and probably for a very good reason. A very, very good reason. After all, a tailed beast was nothing to laugh at. What makes you think it was something that could get out? Menma raised a brow in suspicion. What else would be in there? From what I've seen, these ceiling areas are awfully big for something that can't do much else other than sit there. Naruto shrugged, decided to play the fool. No, there wasn't any immediate evidence that whatever these ceiling areas held would be a living thing. Only Madara and Naruto knew what was sealed in them. Ironically, they housed boxes, the boxes being completely unable to move on their own and being completely sealed and only Naruto able to open them. For what it's worth, there aren't any food or water supplies in the ruins. I don't think anyone or anything could have survived in there unless the seal was preserving something no longer alive, or keeping it in a state of suspended animation. Gaara offered. Unfortunately, I've been told that with the seal area so thoroughly destroyed, we can't say what the purpose of the seals were. Naruto knew that Suna had a pretty decent sealing library thanks to some of the Uzumaki from the wandering faction settling in the village. After all, Gaara was a descendant of one of those Uzumaki. If they'd found nothing, then he was inclined to believe them. Tsusan, you should get Naruto back to the hospital. You know how Tsunade-san gets. Menma muttered, eyes on the ruins. Naruto wondered if there was anything more he could do here. He knew more about these seals, but he was also hindered in that something told him to keep it to himself. Minato chuckled nervously, placing a hand on Naruto's shoulder. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us, Gaara-san. It was rather educational, seeing the area for myself. Reports don't always convey the true gravity of the situation. Before Naruto had a chance to say anything to Gaara himself, he was standing back in his hospital room, sand pouring out of his shoes and onto the floor. Just what was he supposed to do now? Yo! Sasuke's greeting was lazy, yet somehow not in the same way as someone would describe Shikamaru's greeting. Naruto looked up from his novel and grinned in reply. Sasuke had been spending most of his free time training, mostly motivated by the Uchiha invasion. Naruto squirmed a bit, inwardly still guilty about temporarily blinding Itachi and Sasuke. He was glad the teen was better. Yo! Naruto's greeting wasn't as cheerful as it might have been had he not broken into Sasuke's house some time earlier. Sasuke walked further into the room but didn't approach too closely. His expression was light, neutral even. He was simply visiting out of courtesy, and not necessarily out of desire to see how a close friend was doing. Sakura hadn't once seen him outside of training with Tsunade, which apparently she'd begun. Suddenly, as though being drenched in icy water, Naruto felt utterly alone. Drifting in a sea of secrets, further and further away from those around him. Before, he'd always had Kurama. Then he had those precious to him, then Madara and Hashirama, then Izuna and Tobirama, then a clan, and finally a whole village. Now he had no one. Not really. And it was lonely, utterly and completely so. He made the decision before he could talk himself out of it, and hopped out of the bed. What are you doing? Sasuke huffed indignantly as Naruto pushed him further into the room and shut the door. There was an ANBU station nearby, so Naruto would have to use seals to make sure that whatever they ended up talking about wasn't overheard. Just trust me. Naruto waved a hand as he stared at the door. Focusing his chakra towards his fingers, he carefully traced out the seal onto the wood, leaving it to glow slightly. He moved to the window and did the same seal. You're kind of good with seals, Sasuke noted blandly. I don't think I ever saw Arashu using seals so casually. Naruto huffed in amusement, noting without thinking, Arashi's a child. Of course he'd be hesitant. For good reason too. Many things can go wrong. Sasuke didn't comment, but it was one of the strangest things about Naruto. Sometimes when he spoke he sounded more like an old man than a genin. Anyway, Naruto continued. Can you keep a secret? That's a loaded question, Naruto. Sasuke replied carefully. If it's major, you know I can't. I have a duty to the village after all. He gave Naruto a look that dared him to say anything that would force Sasuke to rat on him. It was a tough place to be, and that fact that Sasuke would still choose the village over whatever Naruto was potentially hiding made the feeling of being alone that much more acute. You know what, that's fair. I can respect that. I'll just tell you anyway, and you can decide for yourself. Naruto moved to the bed and sat down. Sasuke stayed where he was, eyes suspicious. Naruto wasn't exactly normal, and Sasuke was starting to suspect more than just not seeing the genin for a few years. There were things that he was running without logical explanations for, and sooner or later, he'd either have to confront Naruto or go to the Hokage. I'm a censor-type shinobi, Naruto stated simply, eyes on his hands. So? How's that a secret? Sasuke furrowed his brows together in confusion, almost relaxing in relief at the harmless information. Not just a censor type. A really good censor. Naruto continued, ignoring Sasuke's question. And there are things about the village that I know because of this. For example, your brother's room isn't connected to the village's seal matrix. In fact, it's completely blocked from sensors, top to bottom. At this, Naruto looked up at Sasuke, the expression on his face decidedly guilty. Sasuke took exactly 3 seconds to connect the dots. Tell me that wasn't you. Sasuke hissed, eyes narrowed in anger as his muscles tensed. It was me. Honestly, I wasn't sure I'd even find anything, and I was literally there for like 5 seconds. Your brother is amazing. I didn't even make a sound and he just knew I was there. Naruto was rambling, but he didn't like Sasuke's anger. He wasn't making it better though. Sasuke's chakra was boiling and Naruto inwardly cringed. The Uchiha sked and turned towards the door. There is a serious investigation going into that, Naruto. Wasting time and resources. I've got to let them know. He made it to the door, his hand on the handle. Wait. Sasuke, please, just hear me out. Naruto dashed off of the bed once again. He was surprised when Sasuke really did stop, hand on the door frame, waiting to see what Naruto would say. Something's going on. Something big. Naruto was pleading now. Perhaps he wanted Sasuke to tell him he was crazy. Perhaps he wanted the help. He wasn't sure. Sasuke's hand left the door, and he turned towards Naruto, looking more confused than angry. What are you talking about? Those ceiling wonders, someone's breaking them, and as far as I can see, that's not a good thing. Besides, don't tell me Itachi isn't at least a little bit strange these days. I sensed something that one time you were talking to me about surpassing him. Naruto really hoped he wasn't asked to explain how these two things were related. That one time, when we were at your house, I saw my brother arguing with your brother, and what if they know something? They're supposed to be geniuses. Sasuke sighed, his shoulders relaxing. You really are an idiot, aren't you? Naruto didn't know where this was going, but that didn't stop the deadpan expression on his face. How the heck do you connect Itachi to those ceiling wonders? They have disagreements all the time. You know, the whole genius thing. Besides, you need to know ceiling in order to break a ceiling wonder, which Itachi knows nothing but the basics of. I can't believe you broke into my house over this. So Itachi likes his privacy, big deal. Sasuke squeezed the bridge of his nose, inwardly relaxing as Naruto's supposed familiar stupidity took center stage. Naruto kept his features light. He placed a hand at the back of his head and forced the embarrassed laugh. Well, when you put it that way, I guess it really does sound stupid, doesn't it? He couldn't explain further without revealing too much, and Sasuke was just so young, so innocent. Naruto really couldn't involve him. I'm sorry I broke into your house. I really wasn't there for long. Sasuke seemed to have completely forgotten all about the level of seals Naruto had been using that night. If he had perhaps taken them into consideration, then maybe he'd realize that Naruto wasn't as much of an idiot as he currently believed. Naruto felt the distance between himself and those around him increase just that much more at the failure the conversation had been. Naruto was able to leave the hospital and go home 2 days after his failed talk with Sasuke. The Uchiha had been nice enough not to tell his father who had broken in, knowing that not everyone would treat the situation as lightly as he had. Naruto was now in his room, back to staring at the ceiling. Something was coming. Someone was trying to take him. Someone knew that he was necessary to open the boxes. And that someone was Uchiha Madara. A man that should not be alive, just as Naruto should not know who he was. If they were looking at the way the world was supposed to be anyway. For all he knew, Madara got here the same way he went to the past. With a heavy sigh, Naruto sat up and walked towards the kitchen. The house was relatively quiet. It was almost always quiet with everyone away on missions or clan training or Hokage duties. It was lonely. A memory swam into focus, hazy but still conveying a sense of longing. Naruto smiled and closed the fridge door, having been staring into its depths with no real intentions of taking anything out. Focusing his chakra, Naruto disappeared from the Namake's residence, probably giving the ANBU guard a heart attack before reappearing outside of the Sarutobi clan compound. Besides, he wasn't supposed to know he had a guard anyway. He waved at the gate guard before casually entering the compound. He'd been here so many times before he was surprised he hadn't realized to come here sooner. Sarutobi Hiruzen was more like a grandfather figure to him than he'd been the first time around. Having given Minato the hat shortly after Naruto's birth, the man had more time on his hands. He had also visited the Namake's residence fairly often, giving Minato advice where he could. He knocked on the door, waiting a moment before being greeted by Sarutobi Asuma. "Ah, Naruto-kun. Here to see the old man?" Asuma smiled widely, used to seeing Naruto at his front door. "Yo, Asuma-sensei. Is he around?" Naruto asked, returning the grin and walking into the house as Asuma stepped back. He pulled off his shoes as Asuma pointed towards the dojo. "Yeah, we're helping Konohamaru-kun master some jutsus. It's his team's off day." It was hard to keep track of where people were in this present. Kanemaru was already a genin. "Thanks, Asuma-sensei." Naruto walked with the man towards the dojo, hearing determined yells and loud bangs. "Slowly, Konohamaru-kun, patience." The soft rumble of the yandame's voice reached them as they entered the dojo. Konohamaru turned towards them, seeing Naruto and not really reacting. Naruto's memories didn't supply much interaction with the boy. He was far less enthusiastic in this timeline as Konoha was far too vast for many of the people to recognize him as the yandame's grandson on sight. Well, that and Naruto caused enough of a stir to take the attention away from the young boy. Naruto waved and Konohamaru gave a half-wave back, taking the distraction as a moment to catch his breath. Naruto surveyed the damage in the dojo, and concluded that they might be practicing the Shuriken Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. "Yo, Gigi." Naruto moved closer to the yandame, who was seated in a position that would mean he was safe from any stray flying projectiles. "Ah, Naruto-kun. Haven't seen you in a while. How did the training go?" Naruto had learnt the basics of the Rasengan from the man seated in front of him, and Hiruzen been the one to suggest the 4-week training session in the forest. Ironically, he'd been the one to teach the Rasengan to Hiruzen in the first place, so really, it was like coming full circle. In reply to the old man's question, he lifted a hand and focused his chakra, a small blue ball forming in his palm. "Oh, wonderful." Hiruzen smiled. "I hear you've been placed on a team now. How's that going?" Naruto let the Rasengan fade before rubbing the back of his head. Not too bad. They're a good team. How's Konohamaru's training going?" He turned the top half of his body to face the boy who was nodding along to whatever Asuma was instructing him on. "He's got potential," Naruto added distantly, thinking of the boy from so long ago. "He's rushing. He got promised today, but we don't really know when we can help him again. A retired Hokage, well, isn't very retired. I know about the ceiling wonders and the attempted abduction. Sarutobi's tone was serious, treating Naruto more like an adult than what he had in previous visits. Hi. It's getting weird out there, Gigi. Naruto agreed. Maybe I can help him. Naruto turned back to Konohamaru. Sarutobi waved him away, interested to see what Naruto would come up with. Alright, Konohamaru, one more try. Asuma stated, backing away while the smaller Sarutobi nodded. He picked up a shuriken and focused his chakra before tossing it, and quickly performing the hand signs. The shuriken wobbled, developed a sort of mutated shuriken double, but otherwise did not multiply before hitting the post. At least it hit the post on target. Naruto was impressed with that. Ne Konohamaru. Naruto approached the boy with his hands behind his head. Can I show you a trick? Maybe not trick, but something that helps me with this jutsu. The boy inclined his head in consideration before shrugging. Sure. Naruto scooped up a shuriken from the box next to Asuma and held it in his palm. If you coat the shuriken in a small layer of your chakra, it sort of guides the jutsu you're trying to perform. Naruto put a little more chakra than necessary into the shuriken so that it would be a visible blue layer. These old guys forget that part because they learned this jutsu after they learned to augment their shuriken throws with chakra. Naruto explained before putting the shuriken down on the ground and performing the hand signs. The lone shuriken was suddenly surrounded by hundreds just like it, making Konohamaru leap backwards in surprise. Wow! That's so cool! Not even Gigi makes that many! Konohamaru looked more like his other self and Naruto grinned at the nostalgia. I overdid it a bit. But the concept can really apply to any ninja tool you use. If you get really good, you can apply it to jutsu too. Naruto created a tiny, very tiny, Rasengan in his palm, adding only enough wind chakra to make it fly a small distance. The disadvantage with the small distance was the lack of time he'd have to perform the hand signs. Luckily he had this jutsu down to a single hand sign. He flicked the tiny Rasengan, and suddenly it was 10 tiny Rasengans whose landing created a small hole in the training ground floor. Naruto laughed, and rubbed the back of his head. Sorry about the whole Gigi. Konohamaru seemed speechless. Asuma had dropped the lighter that he'd been about to light his cigarette with. What has Kakashi been teaching you? He muttered, bending down to pick it up again. Hiruzen, on the other hand, was contemplatively silent. That mastery of the Rasengan was not possible with the amount of time Naruto had been training. In fact, it was highly possible that Minato would have trouble with that level of mastery, and he'd been particularly exceptional with the Rasengan. Not to mention his mastery of the Kagebunshin no Jutsu. To apply it to a jutsu was unthinkable. Something only an Uzumaki would be crazy enough to try, especially a jutsu such as the Rasengan. That boy sure was a wonder. Alright, Konohamaru, you give it a try. Naruto ruffled the stunned boy's hair before walking back to the older Sarutobi. He noticed the negative drop in the man's chakra. The kind of negativity that would mean he was thinking too hard and was probably the right amount of suspicious. Nah, Gigi, do you think he'll get it? Naruto was hoping to distract the man. Come, Naruto-kun, let's leave these two. There's something we must discuss. Sarutobi stood, his age joints cracking in protest. Konohamaru's disappointment was dampened by his excitement to try the jutsu again. Asuma watched silently, not as suspicious as his father, merely curious. Naruto was wary. What did the older Sarutobi want to know? The old man was in no hurry, leading him to the personal study where Naruto knew there were a number of high-level privacy seals. He'd put those seals there himself, so he was sure that whatever Hiruzen wanted to talk about it was going to be very serious. Hiruzen seated himself behind the small table and invited Naruto to seat himself as well. Naruto sat carefully, wondering how long the conversation was going to be. So Naruto-kun, or rather, should I say Naruto-sama, why haven't you said anything to Namake's Minato about your presence? Hiruzen asked politely, taking a deep puff from his pipe, not in any hurry to have Naruto answer, but his gaze was penetrating. Naruto had mere seconds to decide how to reply, given that his reactions were key if he planned on lying. Chapter 25. Now before you say anything, Hiruzen started, taking a puff from his pipe. Because I can see the denial on your face, Naruto-kun. And I can call you kun, since you're younger than me. After all, you died at around my eldest son's age. Hiruzen chuckled, honestly enjoying this fact more than Naruto thought he should. It's fascinating to see how similar you are to Namikaze's Naruto. The man paused yet again, appearing to mentally compare the two Narutos in his mind for a moment before continuing. Let me start by engaging in an old man's pastime, by telling you some stories from my youth. Naruto relaxed a little and nodded, still choosing to keep silent. I remember the day my father Sarutobi Sasuke, the then clan head of the Sarutobi clan, received the invitation to join Konoha. Senju Tobirama was an imposing man, young, powerful and intelligent beyond his years. Worse still, he knew it. Hiruzen paused to chuckle. Hiruzen threw the shuriken, watching its path intently as it sailed towards the post. It was a hot day, the sun glinting off the metal, reflecting back at Hiruzen almost painfully. The sudden commotion by the compound gates caused him to look away and miss the shuriken's landing. He immediately started running towards the gates, eager to see what had the guards so noisy, training all but forgotten. He hadn't gone more than 2 feet before his father barked out. Hiruzen, stay out of it. This doesn't concern you. His father was sharper than most would give him credit for. He was a quiet shinobi, preferring to think first and act later. It was a trait that garnered him a lot of respect from the other clans. His judgments were often astoundingly accurate. Hiruzen hunched his shoulders and pouted. His father ruffled his hair with a soft smile. Go back to your training. The pout disappeared, turning into a mischievous grin. That hadn't been in order. He waited for his father to walk around the corner before scaling the wall and carefully working his way towards the gate, trying to be as quiet as possible. It was good training. A lone shinobi stood at the gate's entrance. He appeared patient, his posture one of a man born into high ranking. He couldn't have been more than 20, yet towering over the shinobi guard who was pointing a tanto's blade in his direction. He didn't appear fazed by the tanto, staring at the gates as he waited, perhaps for Sasuke to appear. Put the blade down. I will deal with this man. Sarutobi Hiruzen matched the man's posture, only there was a grace to the older shinobi that the younger had yet to learn. After all, Senju Tobirama is a man who should only be treated as a guest. Hiruzen's eyes widened. Senju Tobirama? No way? He'd only ever heard stories of the man. Looking at him now, comparing him to the stories he'd heard, Hiruzen couldn't help the excited glee bubbling in his chest. That glee turned to ice the moment Tobirama's sharp gaze slid over to his spot on the roof. He would have ducked out of sight, if his body were able to move past the shock. The gaze was piercing, seeing a world that Hiruzen could only imagine. Strangely, there was a measure of expectation as well. What the man could be expecting was anyone's guess. Hiruzen was hardly older than 7, still young by Sarutobi standards. However, by Senju's standards one could say he was greatly lacking. Was that what Tobirama was looking for? No, it was something else. Something more. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, it was gone, leaving Hiruzen free to take a deep breath. Senju Tobirama. A fearsome shinobi indeed. Hiruzen watched as his father walked with Tobirama to the meeting room, not daring to follow this time. There were some things he wouldn't be able to sneak past his father, and this was one of them. It was only later that I learned that we had received the invitation to join Konoha. We didn't accept right away. My father was a careful man. He was no fool to the dangers such a dream as Konoha would face. He waited, wanting to see how the newly formed village would fare against outside threats. He also wanted to see how it would affect the warring clan states. If two fated enemies could come together, then perhaps there was hope. Hiruzen put his pipe down, eyes distant with the memory of his father. A few months passed before my father made decision. And so we packed up and moved towards Konoha. The day we arrived, well, that was quite a memorable experience. Hiruzen's shirt was being pulled backwards by his father, to stop the boy from running ahead. They'd been traveling for weeks, slowly making their way from the Sarutobi compound to Konohagakure. To say that Hiruzen was excited would be an understatement. They'd finally spotted the village gates and Hiruzen wanted nothing more than to drop the pack from his shoulders and run towards the awe-inspiring gates. Konoha had quite literally sprung up overnight, the prowess of Uzumaki Naruto known far and wide. That feat alone was enough to convince Sasuke to move the clan to join Konoha's ranks. The other major factor in his decision had been the village's defenses. That alone was the reason Sasuke stopped Hiruzen from dashing forwards. He didn't know if there were any security seals that would activate. They'd all heard the tales of the nigh impenetrable village walls, protected by an array of seals so complex that there had yet to be a secure way found to infiltrate. Not too many had tried, but enough had to garner the newly created village a deadly reputation. The village did not deal with intruders kindly. Holding on to Hiruzen's shirt no longer became necessary as the boy was forced to spring backwards due to the sudden arrival of one very orange-looking shinobi. "Yo!" Hiruzen gawked at the man in orange armor, with hair sunnier than the brightest day and eyes squeezed shut with the force of his large grin. "My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I'm so glad you decided to accept our invitation. The Sarutobi clan is most welcome in Konoha." Sasuke was quicker to recover, keeping calm and bowing to Naruto with a soft greeting. "We are honored to have been considered. Standing with the prestigious clans such as those who founded Konohagakure is more than I could have asked for in my lifetime." Naruto's grin widened, and as his eyes opened Hiruzen found himself lost at sea. This man was the feared Uzumaki Naruto. "So you're Sarutobi Sasuke?" Naruto leaned in to examine the Sarutobi clan head, taking note of his appearance with a critical eye. After all, to Naruto, this was the man who was Uchiha Sasuke's namesake. "I would love to spar with you. When you've settled, of course," Naruto stated with a large grin while Sasuke felt himself grow nervous. He was no stranger to Uzumaki Naruto's reputation. The man was a monster of a shinobi. "This is my son, Hiruzen." Sasuke felt the change of topic was needed. He gestured to the star-struck boy at his side, who had yet to close his mouth since Naruto's arrival. Naruto's face seemed to twitch slightly as his gaze moved to the young Sarutobi. He blinked, slowly raising a hand and placing it on Hiruzen's dark brown locks. Hiruzen held his breath and dared not move a muscle, not really sure what this all-amazing shinobi was doing. "GG." Naruto suddenly snorted, moving his hand away from Hiruzen's head and towards his torso scarcely higher than what could be Naruto's navel, where Hiruzen now understood that Naruto had been measuring his height. Before anyone could ask why Naruto had called the small boy an old man, Uzumaki Naruto burst out laughing and kept on laughing for a full 10 minutes. Every time it appeared he was finished, he simply had to look at the poor pouting Hiruzen and he'd burst into peals of laughter anew. "Ah! That laughter! He did it for 2 whole weeks. Can't say I was a fan." Hiruzen chuckled. "I would be walking through the village and somewhere off in the distance I must have caught the Shodai's attention because suddenly all I would hear was his laughter. He never explained why and no one was brave enough to ask. He eventually stopped because Tobirama-sensei would smack him upside the head every time he started laughing. These are very interesting stories, but I don't see what they have to do with me being the Shodai." Naruto was careful in his wording. He was testing the waters. There were too many unknowns at this point for him to be sure that he could trust Hiruzen completely. But I'm only at the beginning. Patience." Hiruzen smiled chidingly, as though lecturing a small child. "My sensei, as you know, was Senju Tobirama. The Shodai would come visit my team often, watching us train while talking to sensei. Their conversations were usually the Shodai asking sensei for advice in some or other matter. But there were a few times where the conversations didn't quite make sense. Not at first. Hashirama just finished sorting out a conflict towards Iwa. Izuna and Madara are starting to settle down and look for wives. Even if they haven't realized it yet. Nawaki is in the academy. Tanaka has started his sealing master training. Mito is more than pleased that Kazuna is interested in medical ninjutsu, even at so young an age. All in all, the village is shaping up nicely." Naruto grinned widely while Tobirama watched his young genin work through katas. He'd spar with them as soon as Naruto left, and their katas were essentially warm-ups. Hiruzen knew this, yet he was eager to hear what news the Shodai would bring. To say he idolized the man would be an understatement. "And how does this version measure up to the previous one?" Tobirama hummed, eyes never leaving his students. He was a careful man, and he didn't much agree with wastefulness. An injury meant wasted time. As a senju, that didn't sit well with him. They were far too used to be ready for the battlefield at the drop of a hat. "This is happening much faster. I can't say much for the other 4 villages. I'm assuming they'll start forming faster too, but if they end up taking pointers from our village, I don't know." Naruto scratched at forehead. "At the very least, having the academy sooner means that we've got a solid training system in place and will be able to strengthen our forces beyond that of what we had last time. It's likely that there won't be any ninja wars this time. Whether or not that's a good thing remains to be seen." Tobirama hummed, analyzing the pros and cons in his mind before his gaze suddenly sharpened. "Hiruzen! You're slacking." The brown-haired genin jumped, having been focusing more on the conversation than on the kata. He was confused though. The conversation made it seem as though they'd tried to unite the clans before and hadn't been successful. Surely he'd have heard about that. It wasn't only with Tobirama-sensei that these sorts of strange conversations were had. Hiruzen paused thoughtfully. Being the student of someone as important as Senju Tobirama meant that a lot of important shinobi wanted his attention. "I was privy to many conversations I supposed I shouldn't have been. Uchiha Madara, Uchiha Izuna, Uzumaki Mido, Uzumaki Asuna, Senju Hashirama, and many, many others. Yet it was only with the founding 5 that these strange conversations happened. I didn't think much of them at first, and honestly I didn't remember them either. You'd be surprised at what your brain picks up on. But we'll get back to that." What more could Hiruzen have to say? "I remember being taught the Rasengan, arguably a jutsu that was hardly my style. When the Shodai taught it to me, I was in awe of being trusted with such a powerful technique. Looking back at that memory now, I realized that he had an agenda in mind. I looked at my students when the day came to pass on the technique, and I remembered quite vividly what Naruto-sama wanted. The jutsu was only to be passed down to the most unruly of my students. There was no doubt that that could only mean Jiraiya. I must admit, there was a brief moment where I considered passing the jutsu to Orochimaru-kun. Yet the Shodai's words seemed to ring true when he said it only really worked for boisterous shinobi. Jiraiya was able to learn the technique after many months. Perhaps even a year or 2. He tried his best to add his own signature to it, but alas, that task proved more difficult than what Jiraiya could complete. As far as I know, he's still trying. We knew that the Shodai was able to add elements to his Rasengan, yet Jiraiya had trouble with it. He eventually passed the technique to Minato-kun. He wasn't the most boisterous student, but he begged Jiraiya something fierce to be taught the technique. He has managed to come close to matching the Shodai with his mastery of the Rasengan. Still, his version of the Rasengan lacks something. Hiruzen paused to scratch at his chin. Naruto, despite the stakes, was enjoying the stories. It gave him the insight he'd been craving all this time. The day Hashirama-sama returned to the village with news of the Shodai's death, the entire village seemed to lose its light. It took a long time to regain the former happiness and peace that had crept into our hearts upon arriving in Konoha. Hashirama was not to be outdone, and in many ways he was a better Hokage. But the same could be said of the Sandaime, Tobirama-sensei. Hiruzen smiled. Each person who's worn the hat has managed to do better than the last in some way. Yet, it's important to note Uchiha Madara's reaction to the Shodai's death. There was an unsettled feeling in the way the remaining founding 4 interacted with each other after Naruto-sama's passing. It was troubling, but there was nothing I could have done at the time. Madara was perhaps the most obvious about his discontent. "Tobirama, where is your blasted brother?" Madara appeared angry, frustrated, and hardly in the mood for small talk. The addressed Senju paused in his instructions to look towards the Uchiha. He remained calm, apparently used to the Uchiha's outbursts. You know as much as I do, Madara, and you know that. Don't tell me you actually believe his story? Madara's words seemed ripped from his very core, as though he'd spat them out before he could change his mind. Is this what troubles you? Tobirama hummed, walking away from Danzu, perhaps the one change Naruto had implemented in Hiruzen's teammates. The rivalry would be better as teammates, perhaps preventing Danzu's dark future. Tobirama placed his hands on his hips as he considered Madara's question. You've always had a healthy suspicious nature. After all, you did see something in your father's death that most chose to ignore. Yet Madara wasn't happy with Tobirama's response. Well? What do you think of things? I haven't been able to talk to your brother in weeks. I've scarcely been able to find him. Personally, what can we do? If you're right, and Hashirama sent Naruto back to his true time, what do we do about it? Tobirama sighed, removing his hands from his waist to wave a hand in the air. We can stop him from becoming the next Hokage. You can have that position for all I care. How do I trust someone who didn't trust us with a decision so important, so far-reaching? He must have asked Mito for help. He's a fool at sealing and you know it. Another decision that wasn't his alone to make. Madara had begun to pace, throwing his hands into the air before glaring at Tobirama as though daring him to disagree. Careful, Uchiha, you're dangerously close to insubordination. Tobirama's voice was low, a warning. You're a fool when it comes to your brother Senju, and one day it'll be the end of you. Madara narrowed his gaze before walking away. That was the last time Madara was in the village. He left after that. I don't know if he spoke to Hashirama, or if he confirmed his suspicions. I didn't understand his suspicions at the time. He left, leaving behind Uchiha Izuna, his beloved younger brother. Strangely, the Uchiha clan didn't seem bothered by his departure. Hashirama didn't even go after him. In fact, it was hardly spoken about. Even stranger was that Uchiha Madara was never heard from again. The remaining three founders never spoke of Uchiha Madara's departure, nor of the Shodai's untimely departure. It seemed to be a sore topic, and so naturally it was avoided. It was only much later, when I was given the Yondaime Hokage position and I gained access to new information, that all these little oddities started coming back to me. I gained access to the Shodai's origin files, something that was strangely not taught in the academy. I learned about how he was from a distant village, with a mother and a father who had sacrificed themselves for the village. I also knew that no such village existed at the time. The Sarutobi clan had an astute sense of history. We are excellent record keepers. Other reports and files began to highlight certain recurring facts. In the shinobi world, especially the world of a sealing master, many things that seem impossible suddenly become all too doable, wouldn't you say, Naruto-kun? Naruto considered the man silently for a moment. He wasn't known as the professor for nothing. Now, whether or not he was still known as the professor in this time period didn't take away his potential to be the professor. He had pieced together the information from careless random tidbits of information that the Founding Five hadn't thought to hide or protect. It would be a great disservice to the Yondaime to deny his carefully pieced together and wholly accurate guess, if his guess was what Hiruzen implied it was. He might not have all the details, yet how could he have gotten those details unless one of the other four told them to him? It would be up to Naruto to tell him the whole story, if he chose to do so. Hiruzen still might have more to tell him. Well, I'm still not sure what this all has to do with me, interesting as these stories have been. Naruto began when a slight knock interrupted him. Yes, Asuma-kun, Hiruzen called. The younger Sarutobi entered with a slight bow of apology at his interruption. The ANBU are here. They wish to take Naruto-kun home. Naruto pouted. Had they left him for a while to enjoy his visit, or had they taken this long to find him? Another time then, Naruto-kun. Hiruzen smiled, winking at him. Was the wink a way of saying his secret, although unconfirmed for now, was safe with the older Sarutobi? Naruto sighed and stood, bowing to the older Sarutobi before walking out of the room with Asuma. This protection detail was getting rather annoying. So, how is Kanemaru doing? Naruto asked, directing his attention towards Asuma, who shrugged. Better now, I guess. Still going to need to practice, though. He's got the potential to surpass even you, Asuma-san. Naruto chuckled, which prompted Asuma to laugh as well. He's got to learn how to hit the post first. As soon as they exited the compound, an all-encompassing chill gripped at Naruto's very chakra core. All he could manage was to grip the material of the jacket by his heart. By the look on Asuma's face, he could only assume the Sarutobi felt it as well. All over Konoha, shinobi and citizens alike stood frozen in their tasks. Minato was instantly alert, mind wondering if this was an invasion of some sort. He could barely raise a hand to signal the ANBU, who were no doubt having trouble obeying the summons. This was disturbing. Konoha was supposed to be without equal when it came to village defenses. What was this? It was almost like the most concentrated killing intent he'd ever had the displeasure of feeling. Before he could do much more than summon his ANBU, a deep, calm voice thundered in their minds. I am Uchiha Madara, and I will not be ignored. Before this day is done, you will hand Namake's Naruto over to the Uchiha clan compound. If you do not, then I declare war on Konohagakure. May the gods be merciful to those who defy me. Naruto gasped for air the moment the iciness ebbed out of his system. Using the village sealing matrix in such a manner. It was unthinkable. What was that Baka thinking? Never mind that, war? Naruto knew he had mere seconds to act. 2 seconds after this realization, Namake's Minato himself stood in front of Naruto. His face was grim as he gripped Naruto's shoulder. We're not handing you over, Naruto-kun, he stated before they were suddenly standing in what Naruto could only assume was a safe house. Stay here. I'm going to get your mother. The words had hardly left his mouth before Minato was gone again. Naruto only had time to look around the room, taking note of the bareness and the seals built into its foundations. This wasn't a safe house. This was a prison. Did Minato intend to lock him in here for his own safety? His father and mother returned before he could look around the room much more, and Kushina immediately hugged him. Menma was still out on his mission. Tu-chan, I don't understand, what does Uchiha Madara want with me? Naruto asked, playing dumb. I don't know, Naruto, but more importantly, how do we know that really is Madara we're dealing with? Minato huffed in frustration, pacing as his thoughts raced. I can't stay here for long, and neither can your mother. We need to be in the village, organizing the clans. If this man is serious, if he truly intends to fight us, then we'll need to be ready. You can't leave me here? Naruto blinked in confusion. He could help in the war. No. You're staying here. For whatever reason, they want you. Kushina pulled away from the hug, her eyes firm as she spoke. There was no arguing this one. But I can't just sit here while everyone else fights a war over me. Naruto stammered. It's unheard of. One person against the whole village. They'll ask you to retire over this. Naruto looked to his father. If things end badly, then perhaps. Minato agreed. However, I don't intend for things to go that badly. We are Konoha, Naruto. We will make it through this. His tone had softened. And what if this is really Madara? He's one of us, a founder no less. We shouldn't fight him. Naruto was pleading now. A war over him? Ridiculous. Yet the tailed beasts were that valuable, and Madara knew it. A declaration of war doesn't sound like he feels the same way. Kushina's tone was sympathetic, more for Naruto than Madara. Naruto grit his teeth. His parents weren't going to be swayed. What if I choose to go to him? Naruto spat. I'm old enough that it should be my choice too. Kushina sighed as Naruto spoke, her chakra building up. Naruto-kun, I'm sorry, she whispered, interrupting Naruto's words. Naruto realized too late, jerking backwards and away from her grasp, but not in time. The seal stuck and he hit the ground, fast asleep. Minato picked him up and placed him on the bed. You're sure he won't be able to leave? Kushina asked, and Minato nodded. Not unless he's a sealing master. You know, we never did find out the extent of his sealing knowledge. Kushina sounded unsure. At the very least, by the time that sleeping seal wears off, it'll be too late. Why do you think Madara wants him? Minato was entirely frustrated with recent events. He's got a peculiar chakra. Mito-sama has likened it to that of the Shodais. There were many seals that the Shodai created which only he could open or control. Perhaps that's what Madara wants. His motives were unclear, his objective all too transparent. The only problem Minato had now was why had he bothered with the announcement in the first place? Why hadn't he just snuck into the village and kidnapped Naruto that way? Minato had no doubt in his mind that the man could have. Had it really been Madara? Let's go prepare for a war, Minato stated grimly, giving his son one final look before disappearing from the room. When the next morning came, the village was deathly quiet. Somewhere during the night, every single Uchiha had vanished from the Uchiha clan compound. There weren't signs of a struggle, and they hadn't left through the village gates. They were merely gone. Minato clenched his teeth in anger. Did this mean they had joined this so-called Madara? Or had they been taken by force? Were they still alive? Many of the clan heads had argued the pros of handing Naruto over to this maniac. They'd even had the audacity to point out Naruto's many failures, comparing him to Menma, who by comparison was an invaluable asset. Some had blatantly implied that Minato should be glad to be rid of such a failure. He was staring at the clan heads now, still trying to come to some sort of agreement. In the end, a debate wasn't needed. Minato had simply wanted to hear the opinions of those he intended to fight with. It had been a long night. One where he hadn't missed the absence of Fugaku. Upon sending an ANBU to fetch the man, the returning report detailing the missing clan had been hair-raising. Enough! I will not hear one more word of sending my son to the slaughter. Kushina growled, banging a fist on the table. Anyone here who wishes to send my son to that bastard best be willing to send one of their own children as well, or so help me I'll take them from you myself. See how you like it. Kushina. Minato's tone was soft, a warning and a comfort. Yet Kushina's words had an effect, a loud one at that. Many of the more vocal clan members were suddenly shifting in their seats, unable to meet the red-haired Kunoichi's gaze. Strategically speaking, sending the boy over to the enemy wouldn't be in our best interests, Nara Shikaka stated, using the lull in conversation to his advantage. We know that they've previously tried to capture the boy. We know he's valuable to them, even if we don't know why. It's safe to assume that keeping Naruto here gives us the advantage. It also means the war won't start off with drastic measures, simply because if we're hiding the boy then they can't be wanton in their destruction of the village. It puts a cap on their efforts. You make a sound argument as always, Nara-san. Minato inclined his head to the other shinobi, who inclined his own in acknowledgement. Is there anyone here who disagrees with Nara-san? They were greeted with stony silence. Shikaka's logic and Kushina's threat keeping all arguments silent for now. At this moment in time we do not know how long we have before this so-called Madara person in on our doorstep. Minato's response was interrupted by the same icy feeling from before. It was gripping, all-consuming. It told them all hope was lost, that they shouldn't even try to fight against it. A swirl of blue chakra rotated in the center of the room. Slowly, an image began to form. Two figures, hazy and crude. Now, Namikaze, I do respect you, but if you insist on carrying on like that we're going to have to get personal. The voice was the same as before, only now it took on a chiding edge to it. Kushina choked on a scream as the chakra image snapped into clarity so suddenly it was hard to comprehend. I'm afraid you've not met my deadline, Madara continued. His arm was stretched towards his right. A kunai pressed against Menma's throat. Menma, who looked as though he'd been beaten repeatedly. The boy could barely stand, one eye swollen shut as blood ran free from several gashes and cuts. I must commend you, Namikaze. The boy is annoyingly loyal. He, unfortunately, cannot give me what I want. It has to be Naruto-kun. You bastard. I'll kill you. Minato could only manage a hoarse whisper. His statement was met with cruel laughter. Kill me? You don't even know how to find me. My, it's been so long since I've had such a good laugh. I think I'll keep this one. A little longer and he'll break. They all do. Different times we've grown up in, little Namikaze. Can you successfully lead a war? Minato watched helplessly as the kunai was dragged to Menma's face, sharp edge digging into his cheek. The only sign of pain Menma gave was a sharp intake of breath. I was bred for war, but you've been living so peacefully, confident in your village's protection. I have a secret for you, little Namikaze. I own those seals. I can manipulate them how and when I choose. There's only one other person in your entire village who can do that, and you've tossed him aside, chosen to brand him a failure. You don't deserve your son, little Namikaze. Madara, you've gone too far. The quiet voice was one that Madara had not heard in many years. I can't believe you've managed to cling to your wretched life for so long, Mito. Madara sneered. You and I both know why I want the boy. Just give him to me. The kunai was removed from Menma's face, and he collapsed to his knees, gasping for air. Madara kicked Menma's side, forcing the boy to fall to the ground. He placed a foot on Menma's back. Wasn't this one a prodigy? Madara's tone had grown thoughtful, continuing as though Mito hadn't interrupted when it appeared Mito wasn't going to reply. I'll trade this one for Naruto. A prodigy for a failure. I think that's more than fair. What do you want with my son? Kushina had managed to fight off the chilling hopelessness enough to approach the chakra figures, her eyes on Menma. Why, little Kushina-chan, what I want is very simple. You see, I want to kill him. Madara stated so sweetly it was as though he was offering Kushina a slice of cake, waving the kunai about with a warm smile. He pressed his foot down, Menma yelling out in pain for the first time since appearing. How many times had he tried to call for Minato only to get no response? How many times had he cried out for his voice to sound so broken? How many hours had he been subjected to Madara's torture? Minato tried to sense out the mark he had left on Menma's shirt, but there was no signal responding. Had Madara removed it? Were they somewhere too far away? Was something blocking it? You have 1 week until the war begins. Graceful, aren't I? Until then, I'll keep playing with this one. Madara smiled, before dropping the kunai from high enough for it to bury itself in Menma's back, whose hoarse cry of pain ranging their ears long after the image disappeared from view. Chapter 26. Minato's furious command was the first to break Madara's spell. We need to find a way to lock him out of the seal matrix, now! His stony gaze was on his wife and the aged Uzumaki clan head as he clenched his hands tightly, desperate to hit an enemy he could not reach. Mito nodded once, but her eyes were grim. I'll be honest with you, Hokage-sama, the Shodai seal matrix is one we've yet to crack. The most anyone has been able to do is create a pocket outside of the seal matrix. What concerns me more is Madara's age. Did you not notice how young he looked? Mito had a good point, who also looked as though a small breeze would blow her away, and who was technically younger than Madara. Madara looked fresh in his prime. Barely older than Kakashi. Minato took a moment to analyze that fact. Senju Tsunade was known to use jutsus to create an illusion of her age. Was Madara doing the same? The man's movements suggested that no, he wasn't. A jutsu might affect one's appearance but wouldn't affect one's body. The age would have shown in his handling of Menma. Minato's heart squeezed, but without a location there was precious little he could do. Kakashi. Minato called, unsure of who else to call, as he would have preferred Itachi. Would Jiraiya-sensei be able to help? Would he work well with Kakashi? Jiraiya was very flashy, Kakashi preferring to stick to the shadows. Yet Jiraiya's ability to gather information was unmatched. So one more then, but who? Haruto? Too important for the seal matrix. Erasure? Too young, yet he had the advantage of being Kakashi's student. Someone skilled at information gathering. Hyuga, Niji Hyuga. Young as well but talented. Haku? Also young and talented. Which would ensure a successful mission. The decision was difficult. He'd leave it to Kakashi. He'd know best who he'd need to work with. Hi, Hokage-sama. Kakashi had been in the meeting, mostly keeping silent. You need to find Menma, go to his last known location and try to see where he went. Take whoever you need. Just leave the initial report on my desk. Minato was quiet, keeping it to just them. The rest of the meeting room was busy discussing amongst themselves, in hushed hurried tones, a clear unease gripping the room's occupants. I want Naruto, Kakashi said firmly. Minato gave him a sour look. It was a dangerous request. He's a really good censor. He might be able to track Menma on that alone, Kakashi argued. Madara won't expect it. If we pretend Naruto is still in the village, then it gives us the surprise element. It won't work that way. Madara has access to the seal matrix, which means that he can sense everyone in the village. Those bubbles outside of the seal matrix might be our best hope at hiding Naruto from Madara. But that will be no different than him leaving the village completely. As always, Hokage-sama, the decision is yours. I can only add my own thoughts. Shikaku had approached, and had been eavesdropping. We should ignore Menma for now. I know he's your son, and you desperately want him back, but have you considered he's a distraction? I suggest we investigate the Uchiha compound. Why did Madara want Naruto to go there, and where did the Uchiha go? If the clan has joined Madara, it's something we need to know, given that fighting against the Uchiha requires specific countermeasures. Ignore Menma? Minato's lips thinned as he pressed them together in displeasure. Shikaku's logic was sound, as always. Kakashi, you're on Menma. Find Jiraiya and get him to investigate the Uchiha compound. He can take Uzumaki Erasure with him. There might be seals involved. Alone? Kakashi asked, referring to his mission. Yes, alone. We need our forces here. A week barely gives me enough time to recall the shinobi out on missions. Minato sighed, squeezing the bridge of his nose. Shikaku, you're on the War Council. We have a lot of work set out for us. Kakashi bowed slightly before shunshining from the room. Being on Menma hardly told him if he was meant to find the teen, or rescue the teen. Still, finding him meant finding Madara, and that meant they at least had one advantage. Minato's decision wasn't a purely selfish one. Naruto watched from the rafters of the meeting room. He'd seen and felt everything Madara had been saying. Yet there was a detachment to his chakra, a detachment that meant his words didn't match his feelings. Why go to all this trouble to get Naruto only to kill him? It was time to get to the bottom of things. In the 2 seconds before Minato's arrival, he'd managed to create a shadow clone. One with the variation of not being so disposable. That clone was now stuck in the prison safe house under Kushina's sleeping seal. The original Naruto was free to research and train for the next week to his heart's content, only using a simple henge seal to ensure that he looked like a perfectly average shinobi. Mostly because now that Minato and Kushina believed him to be locked away, he'd been able to roam freely with little to no resistance, and definitely without worrying about a squad of ANBU following him around. Disappearing from the room, he focused his reappearance on the Uchiha compound. He wanted to have a look around before Jiraiya did. Taking a deep breath, and holding it, he pulled in as much concentrated senjutsu as he could manage before directing it all to his eyes. He wanted to see the seals in the compound without having to activate them with chakra. If Mito and Kushina were focusing on the seal matrix, then they'd see his chakra if he activated it so blatantly. The pain in his eyes was different from the trials. This time it was more of a dull throb. When he opened them, he immediately recognized the difference. He'd done something right this time. He could see the seals as he had been able to do so before. With a grin, he looked around the immediate entrance of the compound, noting nothing different to the seal matrix he'd implemented upon creation. Walking further in, and still nothing new. Not even little day-to-day ones, such as child safety seals when starting a new family. The Uchiha had apparently trusted in his original design. But, with the Uchiha gone, that meant he was free to go to Itachi's room without worry. Shunshining straight to the entrance of Sasuke's house, he didn't bother taking off his shoes as he walked towards the closed door of Itachi's room. His sensing ability picked up a large amount of residual chakra moving in this direction. Had he been right about Itachi's suspicious behavior from the start? The seals in the clan head's house were mostly intact. All except the area around Itachi's room. If he had to say, It appeared as though the room itself had been ripped out of the seal matrix, leaving a gaping hole of vulnerability in the village defenses. How careless! Well, if anyone was stupid enough to break into the village through the Uchiha clan head's house, then they deserved whatever they had coming to them. Still, with a tsk of annoyance, he pulled open the door, taking note of the less than immaculate appearance. There had been traffic through this room, and a whole lot of it. This was where the Uchiha had gone. Looking to the opposite wall, he saw the seal that Madara or even Itachi had been trying to hide in removing the room from the matrix. A teleportation door. Once opened, anyone who'd step through would come out wherever the other door was. They could be halfway across the elemental nations for all he knew. Even saying they were realistically a week away was ridiculous. If they had the ability to create a seal such as this one, then they had the ability to create another doorway to get back to Konoha. Were they planning a surprise attack by coming back through this very door? Naruto's gaze narrowed in frustration. Given Madara's emotions during his little speech, even Menma's, there was more to this story than what they were telling. Menma hadn't been scared at all. In fact, he'd been highly focused, perhaps on acting out his part of the play. What was the end game? Who was the real enemy? This whole business of thinking was not his favorite area of shinobi expertise. This was where Tobirama and Izuna had shown. Hell, even Madara. Approaching the sealed doorway, he tried to put some senjutsu into it, to activate it. If he didn't have answers, he could try finding Madara and asking the man directly. The seal, however, required a specific sequence of hand seals to open, and apparently someone in the Uchiha clan had taken it upon themselves to learn sealing because this style meant he couldn't see what the combination of hand signs were without a Sharingan. So it appeared he wasn't going to find Madara using the doorway. If the man wanted Naruto, he was sure making it hard to find him. Alternatively, Naruto could just leave the village. Go find the man the hard way. Yet there was still something in Konoha that needed his protection. He was going to have to stay close by. Pulling out a pot of sealing ink, he charged it with senjutsu before throwing it against the transportation seal, effectively melting its foundations. They wouldn't be able to come back this way, if that had even been their plan at all. Leaving the Uchiha compound, as he was sure Jiraiya would be there soon enough, he decided that perhaps it was time to finish that conversation with Sarutobi Hiruzen. Kami knew he needed the ally. You asked me why I hadn't told my father who I really was? Hiruzen had just returned to the compound after Minato had adjourned the meeting so that they could all get some needed rest. It would be a while before they could have more of it. He jumped at the voice turning towards the shadowy corner he just passed. Your office? An unassuming shinobi asked with a raised brow. Unassuming to most, Hiruzen knew exactly who this man was. He nodded and moved to the room from yesterday. When he arrived, Naruto was waiting for him. Had enough of playing games? Hiruzen asked. I wasn't playing. I was merely seeing how much you knew. Naruto replied, heading into his older form, his voice deeper and more commanding as well. Sit, Hiruzen. It's going to be a long conversation. I suggest your eldest son tends to the clan duties in your absence. Naruto waved a hand towards the seat across from him, while a shadow clone formed without command. The clone hinged into a copy of Hiruzen, who then left the room to go deliver the message that he'd be taking a longer break than expected. Old bones and all that. Taking the liberties, are we? Hiruzen raised a brow at the clone but sat nevertheless, grateful to be saved the trouble. Firstly, Naruto began, ignoring Hiruzen's comment. I don't know if my arrival is coincidental to recent events' timing, or if it was instrumental. Why now of all times? He had been an easier target when he was younger. Secondly, I said nothing because I was enjoying the quiet. Being Hokage was demanding in ways I could never have expected, especially to a village as new as Konoha had been. Ah yes, the paperwork is rather tedious. Hiruzen inclined his head in agreement. No, it wasn't that. Naruto sighed and looked down, trying to find the right words to express what he meant. I was sought after every minute of the day. Training advice, team formations, jutsu mastery, mission rates, clan disputes, all of it, every waking moment. I barely had time to think. At the time, I hadn't realized how much it was exhausting me. When I got back here, however, it all crashed down around me. The peace I suddenly had was nice. Naruto looked distant, smiling softly at some or other memory. It was also hard to really comprehend my reality. I was taking a moment to let it sink in that I was never going home. It wasn't all that hard. Hashirama's seal had been quite well designed. Seal? Hiruzen interrupted in confusion. Hi, as you correctly guessed, I was from another time. This time, to be precise, it was an accident, one we later learned was due to Hashirama's past actions. Actions he hadn't committed in your past, but in mine. Confusing, I know, but somehow, the guilt he felt at having pulled me from my true present and into the past never left him. If anything, it seemed to grow and it consumed him to the point where he felt that he needed to send me back. Naruto explained sadly. His actions only became clearer to me when I had a moment to think about them. That mission where I had intentionally gotten myself stuck in that time-sealed trap. I had a lot of time to think things through. I realized that Hashirama felt like he owed it to me to send me back here. You're not upset? Hiruzen asked, a picture of Naruto's life forming in his mind. How old were you when you got sent to the past? 16, same age as now really. I am upset with him, and at the same time I'm not. There is the part of me that never knew him, the part that grew up here. That part doesn't know nor understand why I should even care. The Shogai part of me, however. Naruto's voice trailed off. It's pointless to be angry though. I knew that immediately upon arrival. Going back was out of the question. I had no idea where I'd end up, who would know me and who wouldn't. But you'd built a whole life in the past? There was Haruto-kun as well. You know about him, don't you? Hiruzen's picture was becoming bleaker the more Naruto spoke. Hi, I know about him now, but I didn't then. The first time I met him was at the trials. There was anger, there was sadness, and there was so much more. Yet, what would I have said to him? He's older than I've ever been. I couldn't be a father to him now even if I wanted to be. He's lived a lifetime without knowing me. Imagine a gaki like me approaching you and trying to get involved. It would be hard, and more pain than I wanted to feel at that point in time. The Uzumaki need time, Hiruzen, you know that. Naruto was crying, silent tears streaming down his cheeks, the emotions he'd felt towards his son finally surfacing. He'd been so used to bottling his emotions due to the Uzumaki sensing, that he hadn't realized just how deeply he'd felt until he was addressing the topic directly. It wasn't a loud cry, and it wasn't a passionate cry, it was soft and silent, an ache of the heart that would never go away. Hiruzen wanted to move towards him, but what comfort could he offer the man now? His response was extraordinarily mature, a response better suited to a man much older than Naruto was. Hiruzen knew that it took a lot for the man to physically hold himself back from family. Uzumaki Naruto was fiercely loyal, especially when it came to close family. Anyways, Naruto continued, wiping the tears from his cheeks as though bringing himself into check once again. I'd been here for a week before I realized something was wrong. The trials, for one, was a massive indicator. They appeared to be more of a screening process. Perhaps it was Mido, now that I know she's still alive, looking to see where I'd pop up. Testing the young ones to see if there was some change and I'd come back as a different person completely. Time travel is untested and therefore unpredictable. She must have wanted to be sure. And then there was the breaking of the sealing wonders. Hiruzen hummed. Still, why didn't you approach your father after your realization? Well, you see, there was a nagging suspicion in my mind that I needed to lay low for a while, a sensation I couldn't explain it, and the understanding that the minute I made my presence known, things would have changed. I'd have to prove it for one, and I'd have had to explain it for another. I was utterly content for this world to never know the truth of my origins. It would have been easier for me and for them. I can think of many negatives to a village coming together because of time travel. The least important one being existential crisis formed from the sudden question of, what would I have been if not for Uzumaki Naruto? Usually the answer would have been, he's dead, but you know, most people won't believe that. Hiruzen was surprised at Naruto's foresight. He was entirely correct in his assumption that a time travel revelation could potentially cause more harm than good. The only good you could see at coming forward was regaining your previous standing in society, the respect and all that come with that standing. As well as the pestering. Naruto deadpanned. I wanted the anonymity to conduct some investigations, but then the trials happened and I was under constant surveillance from Menma, in particular, was highly suspicious of me. It was either waited out or come forward. I chose the former. Naruto scratched at the back of his neck in thought. I don't know what his connection to Madara is, but I suspect Menma isn't as much of a fool in sealing as he would like to appear to be. Madara would have needed a sealing master to break those sealing wonders. You suspect your brother to be a traitor? Hiruzen rose a brow. He'd forgotten just how brilliant Uzumaki Naruto's sensing was, and the deductions he could make because of it. Naruto shook his head. It's more complicated than merely traitor, you see. I don't know who the real villain is. Hiruzen had no idea what Naruto meant. It was plain to him and everyone else in Konoha that the man who declared war on them was the enemy. Yet Naruto was hesitating. Was it because he held Madara in the opinion of a close friend? Were his emotions getting in the way of things? Madara was never declared a traitor by his clan. Not like before, Naruto muttered. And their disappearance points to them having joined him. They must believe in his cause, whatever it might be, even Itachi. Madara was a traitor before? Hiruzen was even more concerned that Naruto was too close to this. After all, if Madara's previous path in life had been that of a village traitor, it was even more likely that he was the villain this time as well. Naruto ignored him, closing his eyes to think things through. Hiruzen was too close to the village to see things openly. He sensed that from the man's chakra, but Naruto was too close to the village and Madara to see things entirely objectively. All the people he could have asked for advice weren't in the village such as Itachi, or they were too close to the problems such as Haruto. Why is it that I never knew Mito was alive? Naruto asked suddenly. Well, she is quite elderly. Most of her Uzumaki clan head duties were deferred. This is the first time she's been seen in many years. Most assumed she'd passed quietly in her sleep one night, and no official announcement had been made. Hiruzen replied, looking somewhat sheepish. The problem is, she shouldn't be alive. Naruto's tone showed he was dead serious despite his callous assessment. Neither Madara nor Mito should be alive. Hiruzen was silent as he considered Naruto's words. The Uzumaki wasn't known for being wildly inaccurate in his assessments. Yet, this all felt as though he was being too emotional. Naruto picked up on Hiruzen's response. He wasn't going to be of much use. Naruto needed a full, unbiased picture, and Hiruzen was too biased one way. I have to go. If I stay here too long it'll get suspicious. That and you're needed in the War Council. I trust that you'll continue to keep my secret, and if you choose to tell my father, just remember this, the information is still protected under a SSS class ranking and I am still the Shodai. Naruto's tone brooked no arguments, and perhaps made no friends either. You can't do this alone, you have to tell him so he can help you. Hiruzen was used to bullheaded shinobi. No, this is my problem. From my past. I won't let those of the present pay for my inability to confront this problem when I should have. If I'd handled things differently, Hashirama wouldn't have sent me to the past, which would in turn affect Madara's presence here now. Perhaps even Mito's as well. Maybe she's been waiting all the time for me to reappear. Naruto grit his teeth, thinking of the day he'd shown Hashirama his paintings and of the look the Senju had on his face. That guilt was something Naruto should have addressed and handled more firmly than what he had. He could hardly imagine Hashirama would have resorted to such drastic measures. Yes, this is all my fault and I will be the one to fix things. After all, I'm the only one that can give Madara what he wanted. I refuse to see people die needlessly, trying to fight him. You and I both know he could burn this village to the ground without even trying. The only question I have for him now is why hasn't he? Imagine sending Sakura up against that mountain, or even Tatsumaki. Hell, anyone from this time, including someone as capable as Kakashi, or even his father. It was hardly fair. Madara was a beast. So no, there was no way in all of the elemental nations he was going to allow those of this time to face a monster of the past. Before Hiruzen could reply, Naruto had disappeared, his unassuming henge back in place. His choices now were to go to the Uzumaki compound, where he could potentially blow his cover due to the sensing abilities of those in the clan. Or he could go to the Seal Matrix, tweak it so that no one could disrupt it, Mito or Madara, or he could go to the Toads and spend time training. A week, however, was not going to be enough. Stopping Madara meant fighting him first, he knew that. So training was definitely needed, and a plan. There was something more going on, more than Mito and more than Madara. Neither of the two would have done this without provocation. Problem was, who was doing the provoking? He was going to have to let this war happen, just to see who this third party was. They were incredibly good at hiding. He closed his eyes as he focused his chakra and his mind, before disappearing from Konoha entirely and reappearing in Mount Myaboku. He had a special connection to this world, hence he was able to transport to it. However, that connection was one way only. He wasn't going to be able to transport back to Konoha. He'd have to travel there the long way. The Toads around him were not surprised by his arrival, no doubt Gamamaru having foreseen it. I hope you are ready for the consequences of your actions, shinobi of the future, for you will face them. I will not give you the words of my prophecy as I have done for those before you and those who will come after you, but I will give you the blessing of a contract with the Toads of Mount Myaboku once more. Gamamaru stated warningly. Step forward, shinobi, and take your place in history as the first Toad summoner. A place you will do well to remember, that was never meant to be yours. The words that Gamamaru had spoken to him so long ago rang through his mind, as he approached the hall Gamamaru sat in, knowing its position well. He considered the greatly aged Toad, and the silence that had greeted his arrival. Was this what you meant? He addressed the elder Toad, features grim. Not even a proper greeting, Naruto boy. Fukasaku chided and Naruto sked in impatience. Now Fukasaku, Naruto-kun is an old friend. One who is dealing with many problems. Gamamaru stated slowly. That's no excuse for poor manners. Shima huffed, in agreement with her husband. Be that as it may. Gamamaru slowly raised a hand to wave the issue away. Yes, Naruto-kun, this is what I foresaw. A great conflict brought about by your actions. However, it is worth noting that you yourself came from a time of impending great conflict. It is important in this time to remember that your actions also brought about a great deal of good. This will be the first war the shinobi nations will face, rather than their third or fourth. Fukasaku offered. Naruto looked down as he considered the words offered to him. If I may, I wish to stay here and train until the war begins. Naruto knew that dwelling on the what-ifs and the if-only weren't going to solve his problem. Therefore he needed to act, and that meant training for now. You would be better served going to your own dimension. The one you created many years ago in order to trap the Senju and the Uchiha clan heads. This will allow you the sufficient time you'll need in order to be ready. Gamamaru replied. Take as many of my children as you need, and treat them well. I, however, am going to sleep. I've waited long enough for your arrival. Ah, there was the old Toad Naruto remembered. At least this time the Toad could remember his name. Naruto bowed with a smile. He'd spend his first day here, testing the Toads for the right sparring partners, and then he'd do as the great Toad had suggested. It was an incredibly good suggestion after all. He could manipulate time in that dimension so as to have all the time he needed in order to be ready. 1 week later, saw Namake's Naruto breaking out of his safe house prison. He'd had to wait until everyone had marched off to meet Madara and the now confirmed Uchiha forces. One clan against the whole village. Even for the Uchiha it was considered utter madness. He'd broken out only once before, after receiving a note from the original to stop the others from changing the seal matrix. It hadn't been difficult. All he'd had to do was wait for everyone to leave the seal matrix control room, even if it was only for a moment, and then lock it from the inside so that no one but himself was able to unlock it. His father had been so distracted by the war preparations, he didn't even notice that the safe house seals had been tampered with. It was somewhat distressing, to be honest. Yet Madara was a large threat to be dealing with. Naruto didn't blame the man for being so preoccupied with the details. Kakashi had returned with little to no news of Menma's whereabouts, as Jiraiya had only been able to conclude that the Uchiha had managed to leave with the use of seals. With Naruto's obvious advantage of being able to see inactive seals, it was almost cheating when he went to investigate the compound. Jiraiya just wasn't in his league. However, Jiraiya had managed to learn the position of the Uchiha clan. Exactly 2 days' march away from Konoha. So blatantly obvious it was almost taunting them. The only exception had been Madara's and Menma's position. They hadn't been with the rest of the clan. Upon learning of the Uchiha's position, Minato immediately approached them, only to be met with warning fireballs. It was safe to say that the Uchiha had left willingly and weren't in the mood to negotiate a return. With all this, Naruto had been forced to learn through careful sensing that Kushina had returned only once, to remove the sleeping seals so that he could eat and continue with his normal bodily functions. Ka-chan, Naruto began, the moment he'd regained his senses, but she disappeared before he could say a word. Now the day of the war was here. Would it be a war or would it be a slaughter? Madara was confident enough in the Uchiha clan's abilities that he felt they were able to take on the entirety of Konoha. Did he have a trick up his sleeve? Making sure he had all of his equipment, Naruto hurried over to the Uzumaki clan compound. There was something he needed before he arrived on the battlefield. Something he'd seen the day he'd gone to give that report to his mother. Hurrying as much as he dared since the village wasn't technically deserted, as Minato had only taken the best of the best, leaving the majority of the forces behind to defend Konoha. A smart move on Minato's part, for the other great villages might have taken the conflict as an opportunity to attack the village, therefore triggering the first great shinobi war. Perhaps one was inevitable given the current village conflict, though it wouldn't do to invite one sooner though. Besides, Minato was an honorable man. There was no sense in taking all the village forces to deal with one clan. The Uchiha may be a fearsome clan, but at the end of the day, they wouldn't be walking away from this conflict had Minato chosen to overwhelm them in one go. That wasn't to say Konoha would suffer heavy losses. They would have. On second thought, Konoha might not be able to withstand Madara alone. He had Itachi, Sasuke and Shisui with him, as well as Menma too. The Uchiha bastard sure knew how to pick his allies. This was starting to seem less and less of a sure win on either side. Sitting on a wall in the Uzumaki compound, being nothing more than a decoration, was his sword. A special sword he'd spent many months working on. He grabbed it before focusing on the original Naruto. The original opened a portal in the dimension, just big enough to grab the sword. With that taken care of, Naruto dashed towards the village gates. He was going to need to go fast if he wanted to make it there in time. After all, he was aiming to stop a war. A roaring pillar of flame announced Madara's arrival to the battlefield. With him was a barely conscious Menma. The Uchiha bowed their respect, Itachi in the front, bowing the lowest. Madara-sama. The preparations are complete. Good. Let's go see if they'll take me up on my offer. Madara's gaze was on the forces opposite them. Namake's Minato was sorely underestimating him if that was all he had brought with him to face the Uchiha clan. They had chosen large open grassland as their war ground, somewhere where no one could easily hide. The forces opposite them were no doubt some of the very best Konoha had to offer, and yet they had less than Madara thought they should have if they were truly taking this seriously. There were perhaps 100 to 150 shinobi all cluttered around the various stations that had been hastily erected. The Uchiha clan deserved more opposition. Konoha had certainly prepared, having set up medical tents, a headquarters tent, a weapons tent, a rations station, and various other stations that suggested a readiness Madara knew they didn't feel in their hearts. For example, they didn't have barriers, physical or otherwise, surrounding them. A sneak attack could easily be arranged. Far too easily. Good Kami, they almost deserved the war. Still, making assumptions could very well get him killed. For all he knew, there was a sealed door that would bring reinforcements at a moment's notice. Or even a summoning seal. He could hardly assume that what was in front of him was all he was going to get. Madara began a casual stroll towards the opposing side, dragging Menma along by the back of his collar. Itachi walked with him, features as blank as always, serving as a bodyguard that was hardly needed. He was far more intelligent, however. Madara would give him that. The boy was magnificent. A wasted talent in the current Konoha, really. He'd been essential to the plans thus far. The rest of the Uchiha remained at the makeshift camp, on guard and ready for any orders at a moment's notice. Once his presence was noticed, Namake's Minato and his wife began approaching them as well, the Konoha forces growing uneasy yet remaining on the border of their camp at the orders of the Hokage. This was a meeting to negotiate terms. Every fair war started with one. If they were lucky, then Naruto would be handed over, no fuss, no problems. If they weren't, well then it was war. Perhaps Minato would offer up a champion, someone who might best an Uchiha champion. Unlikely, but a possible course of action. However, if that were what the Hokage was planning to do, he wouldn't have brought so many forces in the first place. Still, Madara, personally, wouldn't have chosen to bring Kushina with. She was far too hot-headed to negotiate terms somewhat peacefully. If anyone found it strange that Itachi didn't at least try to be more humane towards Menma, they didn't voice it. Itachi and Menma were supposed to be best friends after all, and yet he said nothing as Madara dragged Menma's half-conscious form across the ground. They met halfway, Minato with a glare cold enough for Madara to see exactly why this man was the current Hokage. He met that glare with an indifferent smirk. "I take it you're not going to hand over Uzumaki Naruto?" He'd had his fair share of starting clan wars. This was hardly any different. Yet the stakes were much, much higher. The nervous buzz of anticipation from the Konoha forces only further reminded Madara of their inexperience with war. This was almost too easy. "Like hell I would, you bastard!" Kushina growled. "And it's Namake's. If you're aiming to kill him, at least get his name right." They were far away enough from either side's forces that at the volume they were talking, it wouldn't carry to the waiting shinobi. It would take some considerable volume to even get a significant order across. Madara had opted to employ hand commands, the Uchiha's sharp vision more than capable of seeing it at such a distance. What would the Gaki in front of him do should things go sour, as they no doubt would? "No, I wasn't mistaken. I wanted Uzumaki Naruto, whom you have in your possession," Madara chided, as though talking to a small child. "Namake's? What say you, or are you going to let your wife do all the talking for you? No disrespect intended, Uzumaki-san." He wanted to rile her up. He wanted to increase her anger, to test how much control Mito had over her. He jerked Menma's collar, jostling his wounds and causing the boy to groan in pain. He watched the heat in Kushina's eyes grow, and the ice in Minato's harden. "I stand with Kushina. I will not hand over my son Namake's Naruto. If it's Uzumaki Naruto you want, then you're years too late for him," Minato replied tonelessly. Fire and ice. It was a match that should not be, and yet they were a powerful duo. Madara couldn't help but appreciate and admire the lineage Naruto had. When they fell in this coming battle, what burial method would he use? The Konoha method had always felt a little too impersonal. His obligation to Naruto made him lean towards the Uchiha clan burial methods. If only they'd cooperate. "Well then, I guess you can give it up, Menma-kun." Madara sighed, letting go of Menma's collar. The boy flickered out of sight before reappearing standing upright and alert, not a scratch on him. "Too bad you didn't just give us Naruto too, San. I imagine you've locked him away somewhere," Menma stated tonelessly. Kushina was too shocked for words, having been completely fooled by his act. Behind them, the Konoha forces rippled with unease. 3-on-2 wasn't fair if what they were seeing meant Menma was a traitor. Would Madara take advantage of the opening the deception caused, attack their Hokage who would no doubt be emotionally affected by such a revelation? Madara's gaze lingered on the silver-haired jonin Naruto had always spoken so fondly of. He seemed to be taking charge, keeping the forces in line. He wasn't a fool. He knew the initial negotiations were important, not that they were changing anything. Still, the jonin was an interesting one. He also seemed to understand that anyone foolish enough to charge in was a dead shinobi. If he were the one to charge in, how long would he last? Perhaps, out of respect for Naruto, he'd spare the man. Make him a war prisoner. What is the meaning of this menma? Minato, on the other hand, was more than furious, a stark contrast to Menma and Madara's cool indifference. His body language spoke of a tenseness born of discipline, of holding himself back. He too took note of the opponent's forces, their calm orderliness. They'd very likely been planning this for years. Rashness would get them nowhere. I believe this is what one might call a form of emancipation. Menma looked thoroughly disinterested. It was a ruse meant to play on your favoritism. I guess I underestimated your attachment to Naruto. My bad. Menma waved a hand dismissively, his tone as nonchalant as though making a guess of tomorrow's weather. However, the implications of his words cut deeply. Menma was implying they'd neglected their son, that they'd hardly showed him enough love to convince the older Namake's child that they wouldn't readily give him up in just such a situation. How can you stand there with him, when he wants to kill your brother? Kushina hissed, eyebrows drawn together, taking half a step forward to jab a finger in Menma's chest. Menma sighed and looked towards Itachi, who didn't return his gaze. As far as he was concerned, this was Menma's problem to deal with. Madara-sama was being dramatic. He doesn't want to kill Naruto. There's just something that he needs to do, and it happens to be something only Naruto can do. What would be more accurate to say is that Naruto can't do it, unless he's dead. Menma offered with a shrug. Kushina's quick jerking motions caused another ripple of unease through the Konoha forces as she brought the back of her hand harshly across Menma's face. The sharp smack of her slapping Menma would no doubt have carried far enough for them to have heard it. Madara knew they were trigger-happy at this point. It wouldn't take much for them to break formation, and that would be their downfall. Minato grabbed Kushina's wrist, physically keeping her from further assaulting their son, while Menma didn't react to the slap other than a clenching of his fists. The bright, angry imprint left behind on his cheek seemed to symbolize their growing distance as a familial unit. Minato wasn't sure when Menma had gotten so cold. He was even more confused as to how he, the Hokage and the boy's father, hadn't noticed. And you support this? Minato questioned, his tone showing how strained he was, how hard he was working to keep the negotiations calm and on track. He knew his sons didn't exactly get along, but this was extreme. To side with a man intent on ending his son's life? For a purpose he could only guess at. Kushina pulled her wrist free forcefully, taking a step back but not daring to take her furious gaze off of Madara and Menma. I do. Hatake Kakashi was correct when he pushed for you to see Naruto as more than a failure. His potential is staggering. Did you know that he's a powerful senser? Better than anyone in the village, actually. I'd say he could sense us right now. Menma mused. His mastery over the Rasengan during that small training period of his was quite impressive. Menma paused, a soft smile on his face as he thought of his younger brother. Kushina's gaze, however, was wide in shock. She'd never heard Menma actually praise Naruto before. Yet you two chose to leave him in the village. I'm sure it wasn't a decision you came to on your own, was it, Ka-san? Menma looked to his mother, his gaze as piercing as it had always been and his features as blank as they usually were, the smile completely absent. Uzumaki Mito has always had far too much say in what goes on in our family. A family she should never had a say in the first place, considering we're not Uzumaki. Menma's tone was cold, resentful even, his gaze narrowing and sharpening as he directed it towards his mother. Kushina flinched, not expecting such coldness from her son. His violet eyes showed her he wasn't messing around. He wasn't doing this as some sort of self-sacrificing notion to get behind enemy lines. Her son, her darling child, was her enemy. Every inch of his being, from his chakra to his posture, told her that he was rejecting them, wholly and deeply. Why? What did Madara have over him? Minato remained silent, analyzing to try and gather as much information that he could, something to help them win this war, anything. So if you're not going to hand over Naruto, then we have nothing more to discuss. Madara sighed in mock disappointment, intent on stopping the conversation between Menma and his parents. Keeping things short and sweet had more of a lasting effect. I suppose we should get on with this little war thing. I hope you're ready. This time, the sadness sounded almost genuine. He turned, intent on going back to the Uchiha. Menma and Itachi lingered, intent on ensuring no sneak attacks would occur while Madara's back was turned. Not that such attacks would have been successful. With Madara's peaceful return to his clan, the Konoha forces were left wondering what now. Minato and Kushina both squared their shoulders, resigning themselves to the fact that this was it. There was no going back. When faced with handing over their son, they knew there never really had been any other choice. They waited a moment more, watching as Menma and Itachi turned away to follow Madara, who hadn't gone more than 3 steps before a voice called loudly across the grasslands. That's enough, Madara, I'm right here. Naruto flashed into appearance, panting as though he'd just run flat out, and perhaps he had. His features were determined, eyes blazing with an emotion that made Madara nostalgic. This boy, he wasn't the Shodai. That much was obvious in his chakra, as well as his body language. He was a village-loving idiot, powerful in his own right, but still entirely Namake's Naruto. Had Hashirama really succeeded in his foolish mission to return the Shodai to his true present? It wasn't appearing likely anytime soon. Naruto! Get out of here! Kushina screamed, about to run towards him only to be stopped by Menma. Get out of my way! Kushina banged on Menma's chest only for him to embrace her, physically pulling her away from Naruto, while she clawed at the arm he'd clamped around his waist. Get him out of here! Minato roared towards the shinobi forces he'd brought with him. Someone! Anyone! He himself had been engaged by Itachi. The genius Uchiha had been smart enough to snag his uniform, preventing him from jumping to Naruto. If he jumped to Naruto, Itachi would come with. Itachi pulled on Minato's cloak, dragging him away from Kushina so he couldn't interfere there as well. Haruto was the first to jump forwards, Kakashi following him only to pull him backwards. Erasure joined Kakashi in stopping his grandfather from approaching. Minato could only guess as to what the two were aggressively trying to tell Haruto as they wrestled him back to enemy lines. An order was an order, however, and no matter what, it needed to be obeyed. Yet, no matter who sprang to obey his order, Madara was closer than any of them. He got to Naruto in the blink of an eye, hand grasping Naruto's jacket and lifting him into the air. Well, aren't you a pathetic creature? Are you sure you're Menma's bother? Madara grinned, enjoying the defiance and irritation on Naruto's face. This wasn't the Shodai, but there were parts that absolutely reeked of the resemblance to the man. 2 shinobi whom Kakashi couldn't reach in time rushed towards their group only for a bolt of lightning to race across the grasslands and strike them both before they'd managed more than 100 meters. Naruto knew that lightning belonged to Sasuke. The young Uchiha had not moved from the Uchiha camp, yet he'd managed to send his jutsu across the entire battleground. Had Kakashi somehow known that Sasuke would be the one to retaliate? Was that his motivations behind stopping the attempts to approach? Well, I'm here, what do you want from me? Naruto growled, gripping Madara's hand on his jacket, and trying to pry the man's fingers loose as he did his best to ignore Sasuke's cold actions. Let's see. It's simple, really. All I want is for you to open some boxes. Madara waved a hand and Shursui appeared. 4 of the tailed beast boxes laid down on the ground before Madara in the blink of an eye. Madara hadn't even batted an eye at the reactions of those around him, his attention solely and utterly on the youngest Namikaze. Naruto narrowed his gaze. 4? Where were the other 4? Surely Madara wouldn't have made a move until he had all the boxes? Then again, 4 tailed beasts were more than enough. Was he running out of time, and if so, what was he racing against? Madara threw Naruto towards the boxes where he slid across the ground painfully. Open them, and I let you go. You leave, your family leaves. We're all so much happier. His gaze was cold, unflinching. Naruto pulled himself into a seated position, wiping the dust away from his cheek that had been scraped across the ground. What's in the boxes? Naruto asked, playing dumb once again. And what makes you think I can open them? Not as dumb as you look. Madara inclined his head and narrowed his gaze to show his growing impatience. You can open them because you have a very special chakra. But you knew that. Naruto didn't miss the fact that Madara didn't intend to answer all his questions. Stop wasting my time. It's very valuable, you know. Open them, or you die where you sit. Madara was serious. Naruto studied the boxes. They were simple. Plain. Made from the metal of the Uzumaki Kekei Genkai. They couldn't be opened without his chakra and the bloodline. They didn't appear to be fakes. They were the real deal. Naruto moved to pick up the first one. He placed a hand on it before quickly snatching it away, making a big pretense of being scared. There was a malevolent presence emanating from the box, and anyone who touched it would know that. He had to believe and show that he believed that opening it would be disastrous. No. I won't do it. Whatever is in there, it's dangerous. Well, I imagine a few decades in a box would make anyone murderous. Madara shrugged. But I'm beginning to lose my patience, boy. Open the box. His Sharingan activated in his annoyance, and Naruto flinched back. It was always a fearsome sight, having Madara's ire directed towards oneself. Yet he squared his shoulders. He was determined to not open those boxes. He made a promise of a lifetime after all. I won't do it. You might as well kill me. I'm not going to open those boxes. Madara looked towards Menma. He knew Naruto. He knew that look. He was serious and not likely to change his mind without some serious motivation. Not even if I kill your mother? Menma's face paled, but he stood firm. Naruto felt his chakra, its confusion. Perhaps Madara had promised not to kill Naruto and his parents, only to threaten death. Perhaps Menma's objectives were to protect them from this third party, and he felt Madara was the closest he was going to get to protecting those he loved. Well, Menma was in too deep now to pull out. Naruto almost felt sorry for him. He let shock dominate his features at Madara's suggestion, even though he was more curious as to why Madara was looking at Menma when he made the suggestion in the first place. He let his eyes grow glassy with unshed tears as he shook his head slowly, as though in shocked disbelief. Was Madara serious or merely making threats to manipulate him? Naruto honestly wasn't sure. Don't you open those boxes, Naruto-kun. Forget about me. Kushina was trying to keep her features light and encouraging, trying to convey all the love in her heart as Naruto looked to her to help him with such an awful decision. Naruto, whatever he does to us, you cannot open those boxes. Minato added, silently trying to tell Naruto that if they died, then no one would blame him. Naruto knew that his reactions were key. His normal overly emotional bullheadedness was in order. He had to defend his parents. There was no way anyone would believe he'd sit idly by while Madara threatened their lives. With a sudden yell of anger, Naruto sprang at Madara, a Rasengan already forming in his palm. Madara stepped to the side, the attack landing on the floor. Perhaps if I beat you enough you'll change your mind. He landed a solid blow to Naruto's stomach, hard enough for the teen to cough up blood. You're utterly out of your league, boy. Madara chided. Naruto, on all fours and heaving for breath that just wouldn't come, tried to think of what to do next, how to react to everything around him. Thinking was going to get him into more trouble. Thinking wasn't his forte. He needed to just act. A shunshin allowed him to get behind Madara, and by some grace of Kami land a solid kick to the man's back. He back-flipped away, landing into a crouch and wiping away the blood dribbling down his chin. He pulled out a kunai as Madara swung to face him with a snarl. Naruto blinked and suddenly Madara's fist was buried in his stomach. He flew into the air but Madara grabbed his ankle and slammed him into the ground. Damn, Having such little chakra to work with was really turning out to be more painful than he'd anticipated, but this beating would serve a greater purpose. Konoha would understand that they needed to fear Madara, that they needed to stay clear of his rage. Still, he couldn't breathe. The thought was urgent, all-consuming to the point where the pain didn't matter. His mother's screams didn't matter. His father's struggles to reach him didn't matter. He scrambled to get to his feet, fingers clawing at the ground as he tried to find purchase, to find balance. Madara's hand clamped onto his throat and lifted. Naruto could barely focus on the red of the man's swirling Sharingan as his head swam. He probably had a concussion, and then some. Let go. The whispered command in his mind was almost a welcomed one. Before Haruto approaches, Madara will kill him. There was an urgency to the command that the clone understood. Naruto fixed Madara with a look, one that he desperately hoped the man would understand. Kill me. He wheezed around the suffocating breathlessness. Perhaps he'd punctured a lung. Who knew? Madara's Sharingan stilled, the only sign he gave of his shock. Kill me, Baka. Naruto hardened his gaze. Haruto had managed to break free from the formation where Kakashi and Erasure had been holding him back. He was running straight for them, Menma and Itachi entirely unable to stop him. Shursui could, but that meant leaving the boxes unprotected. Haruto was skilled enough to evade Sasuke's lightning, and that meant he was fast. Naruto needed to end this, and in the next few seconds. Madara did not move, eyes taking in his face, trying to decipher the hidden meaning, if there even was one. Madara, please! Naruto almost whimpered. Almost. There you are. Madara grinned, his hand jerking instantly, and the clone going still with a loud snap filling the air. And then, silence. Sasuke and stopped trying to attack, Minato and Kushina had stopped struggling. Only Haruto, silent and deadly, was still trying to reach Naruto, still refusing to give up and acknowledge what his eyes had seen. Kushina's scream of anguish was the only sound in the deathly silence that gripped the shinobi forces as Madara threw the clone at Haruto. The Uzumaki caught the lifeless body, skidding to a stop in shock. He stared down at the battered boy, in complete disbelief. Why go to all the trouble, only to end the boy's life in a mere moment? Should he have tried to use his chains? His control hadn't been what he would have liked, and so he hadn't so much as dared in case he had hurt the boy. Menma had gone still, the only reason Kushina had been able to shove him away and dash towards Haruto. She grasped Naruto's jacket, pulling her youngest son to her chest where she hugged him close, tears streaming down her cheeks. Naruto, oh Naruto! Madara looked at the boy's eyes, still open and completely devoid of life. He frowned. Had he been wrong? Had he just killed a young boy for absolutely no reason? It hadn't been his intention. He had been so sure that he'd seen the boy as a clone. His Sharingan did not lie, so why was there a body? Minato, on the other hand, became a man possessed. With a scream of utter rage, raw enough to break, raw enough to sting, he threw a kunai at Madara, who stepped backwards. Minato flashed in front of the Uchiha, Itachi looking much like a stuffed animal who'd been pulled along unwillingly. He immediately let go of the Hokage. Madara could deal with that mess. He instead turned to Menma and pulled him towards Shursui. There were consequences for this path, and they were going to have to start preparing. The plan had never been to kill Naruto. Minato already had a Rasengan in hand, slamming it towards Madara, who hadn't been able to dodge. He took the full force of the jutsu. Well, he would have, had a hand not grasped Minato's wrist at the last second and pulled him off course and towards the ground, Rasengan hitting with an earth-shattering impact and flying into the air. Madara jumped away from the crumbling ground and closer to the Uchiha compound. Minato growled, ready to attack the person who'd interfered, only to lose his momentum immediately upon seeing exactly who was holding his wrist. Now Madara, was killing the boy really all that necessary? A familiar voice chided. Madara looked towards the hand's owner, seeing the bright orange armor, the whiskered cheeks, the sunshine blonde hair, and the ocean blue eyes of the Shodai. And that concludes part 4 of this story. Thank you for spending your time here at Ichiraku Ramen and listening all the way to the end. Your support helps keep these stories alive and allows the shinobi world to continue through new adventures and alternate timelines. If you enjoyed what it takes to be Hokage, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future stories. Once again, full credit goes to Solara Myles, the original writer of this story. If you would like to read the original version, you can find the link to the story in the description below. Let me know in the comments what story you would like to hear next. Until the next time, stay safe, and I'll see you again at Ichiraku Ramen.